Hello, everyone, and welcome to another epic reread. Before I go any further, I want to reassure you, our audience, that you did not miss our live streaming and that despite our best efforts, we're still banned from live streaming by YouTube and that it could possibly last until February 2017. So, the Hype Swatch is assembled today to discuss my favorite and objectively the best chapter in A Song of Ice and Fire. I am talking about A Storm of Swords Brand 2. We also have with us today a returning guest. I'm talking about Davos Finger's very own Scad. So, Scott, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Anne. I'm Scad. I'm with the Davos Fingers podcast, objectively the best Song of Ice and Fire podcast around. If you've never heard of us, you can check us out at davosfingers.com. That's objectively everyone's favorite character, davosfingers.com. We just cover Song of Ice and Fire 5 chapters at a time and have a great time doing it. So I love the Hype Swatch. Glad to be back. Had a great time the first time when we covered a Danny chapter forever ago, and really excited to be back and bring the hype.
Thank you, and we're really happy to have you back. Tinker, do you want to say a word?
Hello everyone, I'm Tinker, as you probably know, and I'm excited about this chapter. As Anne knows, I'm not a great fan of Bran chapters, but I've got to admit that this is probably one of my favorite ones. So when I was reading, like, oh, it's this chapter, I like this chapter, so really great choice. If it's got to be a Bran chapter, this or the last one are probably my two favorite ones. So I was happy. I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Thank you. Don Willie?
Valo Mogolis, everybody. Don Willie back again with the Hype Swatch, and glad to be discussing this chapter, which, it is one of my favorites as well. And finally, something that Jerry can't hate on too much.
You're betting. Jerry?
I mean, I agree a lot with Tinker here that, first let me introduce myself. Jerry the Targaryen Steamboat here. Y'all know who I am. So, I agree a lot with Tinker here that in the set of Bran chapters, this is definitely one of the best ones out of the last one because, Bran doesn't speak that much in either of those chapters. Love this book, by the way. Can't wait to talk about it.
Thank you, guys. So first, a little bit of info about the chapter. As always, you should read the chapter before you watch this video, but in case you haven't, the chapter summary will be linked in the description box below. So this chapter takes place in mid-November 299 AC. For reference, the Battle of the Feast of the First Man happened at the beginning of the month. The Night's Watch escapees are currently marching back to the wall, and now Jon's reaching the feast with his wildling companions. At the same time, Dan is approaching Meereen in King's Landing. Sansa marries Tyrion. In the Riverlands, Jaime arrived in Harrenhal, held by Roose Bolton after being maimed by the Bloody Mummers. Arya is wandering with Sandor, and Catelyn and co are on their way to the twins for Edmund's wedding. Throughout the Storm of Sword, we hear about Bran's travel through the Wolfswood to the Night Fort, and it spans from mid-October 299 to mid-January 300, so roughly 3 times. And the chapter opens as they're trailing through the mountain north of the Flint Hills after the Wolfswood. Sorry. So, first basic question for everyone, what do you think of the chapter? Like, how much have you loved it? What are your favorite parts? Samuel, if you want to start.
Okay. Yeah, sure. You know what? I liked the fact that they have the references to what's been going on outside of Winterfell, such as the fact that people still have conflicting reports about how it is that Winterfell got burned down, but they know that Ramsay is out there looking for Bran and Rickon, and also there's still the Iron Men that are kind of scattered throughout the north who are holding certain territories and battling people. And they come across this this little known family, and they're kind of debating on whether or not they should actually even talk to them. And a lot of the backstory that we get, the tourney at Harrenhal, Night of the Laughing Tree especially, and what is Rickon and Asha doing right now, because Bran is like, we're out here in the cold, we can't go on the King's Road because Jojen keeps on saying how it's too dangerous. There are a lot of layers to this whole thing, and I think that this is one of the way that this was laid out is one of the reasons why we love this series, is because it really goes out of its way to fill in things that may not necessarily show up on the page in first person perspective, but we definitely get to see how it affects characters' motivations going forward, and some of the consequences of things that they've done in the past. So yeah, like I said, I love this chapter for that.
So I'll jump in if I could. Bran chapters are different than most, and I think it's why some, myself included, sometimes get a little bit bored with them. Sometimes this one's, I think, is an exception, but Bran chapters are not about what's happening. Bran chapters are about growth. They're about learning. They're about where the story is headed in general, and taking a peek at this character that, unless you're relatively blind, you can see has a destiny tied to him. And so a lot of the time it's hard to pin down exactly what's fun and exciting about them. But I think this chapter, in addition to having that type of feel, this chapter gives a lot of history, which is always fun to see. It's got some interesting stuff with the mountain clans that you don't get a lot of, that I think paints a bit of detail around the loyalty that some of the houses have toward the Starks, and helps you kind of predict where maybe the future's headed. So that's what I like about the chapter. Some of the history, as well as some of the background you get on some of those mountain clans that may be able to direct us toward where we may be headed in the future.
If I could go next, it's just, I completely agree with one of the things that Scott says, how you learn about the loyalty of sort of, the Starks are my favorite house, and I really like the northern houses, and sort of the loyalty that they have. And when they meet this man in the cave, the little man, I really love what he says. When there was a Stark in Winterfell, a maiden girl could walk the King's Road in her name-day gown and still go unmolested, and travelers could find fire, bread, and salt at many an inn and hold fast. But the nights are colder now, and doors are closed. The squids in the Wolfswood and the flayed man ride the King's Road asking the strangers. It's one thing that I really liked seeing. We hear more about, as Scott said, the northern houses, who they were, and that sort of like loyalty that they had to the Starks, which I really like, because I love the Starks, and as I get really angry when people betray the characters that I love. I cannot stand it. So I love it when you kind of see that sort of, loyalty. And then you go to the, there's like 3 parts to this chapter. At the beginning, it starts a lot of complaining about Bran because, it's a very hard travel. They're not going through the King's Road. They're going through the mountains, and it's really hard. Like we say, like, Bran, why are you complaining so much? But you have to be honest. If you were you in the journey, I would be complaining just as much as he would. that's me being honest. I would be like, oh, please come, just go through the King's Road so I can kind of understand him. And then you meet, this kind man who tells you a bit more about, the Northern House. You know more about the Northern Houses and how loyal to those guards. And then you kind of end in this nice story. I love all of this stories about knights and stuff. I like Bran, not the scary ones, but these kind of fancy, nice stories. I really love. It's kind of like a very nice ending, but it also has to do with the Starks and with the wolves and all the, there's a lot of theories that come out from this story. So there's like a lot of things that you can take from this chapter that I like.
I'm muted. And Jerry, you must surely have at least one good thing to say about that chapter.
Yeah, well, like Tinker said, it starts out with a lot of complaining, a lot of bitching from, the number one whiner, I don't know about the number one whiner, but one of the main whiners of this book, Bran. But, he even in his complaining, he does point out of a lot of good points, like, he mentions, he kind of breaks down a lot of the North. About who's the most loyal, like the Umbers are the most loyal. Let's not get into anything about that. And like then we also have like that character before, like the character they meet that gives them shelter for a little bit. He talks about how things are different from the when the Starks are around, and then there's also like some of the things that Bran was saying, like that are wrong, like just go to the King's Road type of thing. Well, then Jojen breaks down, this is why we can't, and Jojen is able to like deduce that it wasn't the Ironborn that's chasing them, which Bran still thinks is happening. It's someone else that's chasing him, and isn't it the guy the guy in the hut or whatever, that little shelter that says that there's Bolton men all around, Bolton men. We thought that bastard was dead, but he's not dead. So
well, that's later. He knows a lot of things.
Yeah, so you get a lot of information in this chapter. So that's one thing that's really good about it. Then you get the story that's got a ton of information in it as well. So this is Bran chapters have always had a lot of good info. Like even if you can get beyond Bran's whining, there's a lot of great information going in Bran's chapters, even the boring ones. Like if you on rereads, Bran's chapters get a lot better because you kind of like numb out his whining and you see all this great nuggets of information in the chapter. So they're really great to read, and this is no exception. And I even there's even a mention of the ice dragon in the sky. There's like a constellation of the ice dragon. Maybe that's hinting to maybe Bran having something to do with the ice dragon in Bran's chapter. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's good. That's a good jump into the beginning of the chapter. So they're now wandering through twisted mountain valleys and things that in my mind look a lot like the Black Forest in Germany. And yes, I agree with everything you say. It's a very rough journey. In one of his whining moments, I thought it was pretty funny, knowing in sight what we know now. Is a little bit jealous, imagining Rickon being all warm. He says that he's picturing him either eating great food at the Manderleys or warming himself before the Great John's fire. But when we know that Rickon is on Skagos with the cannibals, that's not as fun. And yes, there's that chapter has one more mention of the ice dragon, and maybe a little bit of foreshadowing, like you said, Jerry, with the blue star in the dragon's eye. That made me thought of maybe the whites with their blue eyes. I mean, anything cold magic related with people having blue eyes. Does anyone else have some thoughts about that? Like the possible meaning of the ice dragon, the constellation?
It's kind of funny you mentioned blue. Blue, the color also, I what do you call it, match with Jon. Like Jon, he's obviously from the House of the Undying, the blue rose in the wall of ice. So maybe Jon will be flying on the ice dragon with the help of Bran. I don't know. Well, we'll see. Hey, I got a question. Is anyone else? What other mention other than the World of Ice and Fire? What other mentions of the ice dragon legend are in the actual Song of Ice and Fire books.
I know there's one in mentioned in the John chapter when he's talking to Ygritte. I think they're talking about the different constellation names, and yeah, he's talking about the ice dragon. Sorry.
So far we got
the quote.
But I mean the point of POVs are either Jon or Bran, so maybe they'll be teaming up for an ice dragon in the future. I don't know.
That would be nice to see them teaming up.
And being the evil, going rogue. Rogue ice.
I don't know. The only dragon anything I know about right now is these dragon tears, which are oh so good. Nah, but seriously, I think that Jon mentions the ice dragon possibly more than once, because I know he says something about the wind being like as cold as the breath of an ice dragon in Old Man Stories or something like that. So.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, yeah.
Okay, moving on. I'm sorry, I'm gonna need to ramble a little bit. Okay, the reason why it's totally random, but the reason why this is my favorite chapter is not even because of the story of the night of the laughing tree, although it's amazing. It is about the coming quote that is at the very beginning of the chapter, and that you've heard me quote pretty much every time I'm on camera. And it is from that chapter. So it's up and down, Meera would sigh sometimes as they walk. And then down and up, then up and down again. I hate these stupid mountains of yours, Prince Bran. Yesterday you said you loved them. Oh, I do. My Lord Father told me about the mountains. I never saw one till now. I love them more than I can say. Bran made a face at her. But you just said you hated them. Why can't it be both? Meera reached up to pinch his nose. Because they're different, he insisted, like day and night or ice and fire. If ice can burn, said Jojen in his solemn voice, then love and hate can mate. Mountain or march, it makes no matter. The land is one. Sorry, I can't help but grind. Like that quote makes me so excited. I think, oh God, I can't remember the name right now, but the idea that the land is one, that the forces of nature is one of the central theme in all of those books. And I'm always quoting, like every time we have a little hint of something that we think is only a Westeros thing happening somewhere else, I always go back to quote this line. Like in the world of Ice and Fire, when we hear about the epic wyverns, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, they're children of the forest type things that live above the Dothraki Sea. Or when we read the Winds of Winter Orient chapter, and that in the Stormlands they stumble into a cave that has signs of children of the forest, or the story of the Lion of the Night in E.T. Like the fact that we're not just assisting, we're not just viewing like something that's a Westerosi phenomenon, but actually, although the Land of Always Winter and the other seems to be something that only happen in Westeros, the same idea of the forces of evil and the long night and the force of nature is something that we see all over the place. And just, I'm sorry, it's going to be a long ramble because I love that line so much. But it's just another reason why George writing again there is amazing. Another reason why I think that line is so great is that in the very next chapter, which is a Davos chapter, it totally contrasts with the speech from Melisandre. And I'm going to quote again. So it's Davos talking to Mel. What is it you would have me see? The way the world is made, the truth is all around you, plain to behold. The night is dark and full of terrors, the day bright and beautiful and full of hope. One is black, the other white. There is ice and there is fire, hate and love, bitter and sweet, male and female, pain and pleasure, winter and summer, evil and good. She took a step towards him. Death and life, everywhere opposites, everywhere the war. So we have on like one part the reads that say, well, everything is the same and interconnected, like it's in their oath where they swear it by earth and water and ice and fire. And on the other side we have Mel with an extremely dualistic view of the world and things. So little question for the panel: what side are you on? Like, would you think is right about that, or do you think they're both right?
Well, okay, so how I see this is kind of like, it's not that they're saying everything is the same. They're saying that there's opposite things, but there's also, there's that thin red line where they're both, like the gray area where it's, one and the same. And it's it really reminds, I think it's George trying to say one of the things he truly believes about writing is like the William Faulkner quote, the only true thing worth writing about is human heart in conflict with itself. And I think in that gray area is where you get that human heart in conflict with itself, and that's what he's pointing out to right here. That's that human heart in conflict itself is when, like, love and hate are mating. And Mel, she's not wrong, but she's not complete. How to say, she's missing that part of herself. It's like she's not seeing that. And that's why probably she gets a lot of things wrong, is because she sees things in too black and white. She refuses to see gray.
I think to me, I also love. I love the passage you read. There's also another, I think it's like the very next sentence that I don't think you did read. One land but over wrinkled, which I think relates as well. It's not that I think Mel is wrong. It's that I think she's seeing the result of or a result that is a possibility. To me, it's a metaphor for the way the land can be, the way probably all of Planetos can be if they're unified by people with the right intentions. And to me, this talking about the love and hate and the marrying them and liking and hating something and these contradictions, it's a metaphor for the creation of someone that will come to lead and create this feeling of unity that Meera is espousing, rather than a lack of that and just kind of embracing the conflict like Melisandre wants to do, wherein it's all about that conflict. So I believe that next line, the one land but over wrinkled, is calling for someone to bring everything together, and that it's going to take someone that understands that unifying message that Meera is talking about. Maybe that's Bran, maybe it's Jon, maybe it's somebody else entirely, but we need somebody to bring about that vision Meera has. It's not just that way naturally by itself. That's the way I view that.
I agree with things that both Jerry and Scott has said, but I also see I also see it a different way. I see it also the difference between spirituality and religion. The Northerners have a religion, but they don't have a book, they don't have a dogma, they don't have a church, they just have beliefs. They go to the trees and they pray. It's between them and their gods. Between both the Seven and the Red Priest, they have a church, they have a dogma, they have a right and wrong, and it's very, it's either their way or you're wrong. You're wrong, and you must be burned, or you have to change. The Northerners don't force anyone to see things their way. Well, the other churches automatically, if you don't do things their way, it's kind of wrong. So I for me, it's always like they believe more in nothing is like everything is part of nature. Everything's part of the way that the gods did, and it's about embracing nature and other ways. While Melisandre is like, this is right and this is wrong, and she has like a limited view of what the world is, because if it doesn't fit into her religion and to her structure, then it's not real. And that's why she misses a lot of things, because she has a very limited world view between and while the Northerners have a spirituality and have you think this can be evil, but yes, it can also be the other thing. Like nothing has to be a certain fixed way, and that's always how I saw it. And it's why I always was more with like the Northern religion, because they they are more open-minded in that sense, in my opinion. Like what I feel about them, they're more connected with nature and the way things are, and it doesn't have to be one thing or another. It can be that, but it can also be the other thing. Everything doesn't have to be black and white. And that's always kind of like I saw it a different way. One is spirituality and a true connection with nature and the gods, and the other one is the religion and dogma that might not actually get you a true connection with your god. It might actually limit you in that connection, because you're not, your head is in a box. And that's always kind of like how I saw it.
I would agree 100% with that. I would say that's like a subset of what I was saying, that I think Tinker's 100% right. Spirituality is like the whole thing. You see the gray part of it, whereas religion, black and white, you're missing that gray by doing this whole with religion, by like just, and I think that's part of what George believes too. Like he believes like religious structures too black and white. There's a gray in between that they're missing out on. It can't be that simple. So
yeah, and yeah, I would agree definitely. I mean, look, we have learned that this story is all about the gray stuff, because think about it. There are characters that in the beginning of the book you might hate, and then later on, you find out that some of the stuff that they've done is not because they're just evil. They actually had good intentions. I mean, Jaime Lannister is the Kingslayer, but he killed the king in order to save the rest of Westeros. Now, that doesn't, excuse him from pushing Bran out of a window, but
yes,
that
it does.
no, it doesn't, Jerry. But that makes him a lot more of a complex character. Whereas, had you not known the reason why he killed the king to begin with, you were like, "Oh man, this guy is just evil. He's breaking his oaths. He's killing the king, sleeping with his sister. He's trying to kill kids." But there are so many different dimensions that are explored. Ned is not the 100% honorable man that he appears to be for most people, because for one, he has a bastard. At least that is the common perception. And also two, on Robert's deathbed, when Robert is giving him the words to dictate, instead of him saying, Ned can reign until Joffrey comes of age, he puts until my heir comes of age. So I mean, there are so many levels of complexity that get explored, and unfortunately, people like Melisandre don't see the world in those kind of terms. They're just like, hey, you know what? I'm following this particular way of doing things, and that makes me good. And all the people who aren't willing to follow that must be the servants of evil. And unfortunately, we have that in real life too. And it's only when people find out, like, hey, you know what? No, this person isn't wrong just because they don't agree with me 100%. Then that's when they're able to expand their horizons and actually able to do more good for the rest of the world.
Again, I'm muted again. We're too good. We're trying to not talk um, on top of each other. Okay, so let's move on with a lot more of Bran walking through the mountains. Um, yeah, one or two things like Scott, you said earlier, like what's really interesting about Brown's chapter is that we see him learning and evolving, and there's well, just after that, there's a lot of interesting things in that chapter with Bran's warging ability and how they're evolving. And just one right there that I sort of want to touch on really quickly. It's just a very small mention of the dire wolf would go to hunt at night because we were lacking food, and would always bring something in his jaws, a squirrel or a hare. I'm mispronouncing that. I'm sure I can't see Danwali, but I'm sure he's not happy about the way I pronounce that. But
and you were actually fine. It's when you pronounce the other word hair when you drop the H.
Okay, so it's something that is, again, a very small little in by George, and it's just because I usually binge reread Bran's chapter. But in the chapter just before, there's Jojen who tries to teach him. Sorry, I have a hard time with my notes. So in the chapter just before, Jojen is trying to teach him to take more control of like stay more mentally present when his warging goes, and don't like lose yourself too much in the wolf. And we see here that Bran is learning to do that, because just in Bran 1, Jojen said Jojen was always telling him to do things when he opened his third eye and put on summer skin, to claw the bark of a tree, to catch a rabbit and bring it back in his jaws uneaten, to put some rocks in a line. Stupid things. I forgot, he said. You always forget. It was true. He meant to do the things that Jojen asked, but once he was in a wolf, they never seemed important. And here, like, again, it's a very small thing, but we see that now when he's inside Summer, that he remembers to do those things. Okay. Do you guys have anything to add on the first part of the chapter before we move on to the story about the mountain clans?
I just have a question about what you just went through. I think I read that a little bit differently than you did. I think what you just said is that Jojen always used to be talking about how he needed to mark a tree or bring something back to prove that Bran was in control, that he had some sort of power rather than just being absorbed by the wolf, that the wolf had power of the relationship, and that there was evidence that he was gaining that control now because he was bringing those things back. And I don't know why, but I always assumed that when Summer was bringing those things back, it was Summer not warged by Bran at that time. You're implying that it's the opposite, that Bran is always warging him every night and all the time, and that it's Bran bringing the stuff back, that's interesting. That's not what I thought. Is that general consensus?
I
was wondering that too, actually. Go for it, Tinker, though.
I read it the same way as you, Scott. When Anne was talking, I'm like, really? That's not how I read it.
I would think that it's probably not. It's probably Summer on its own, because how does Bran refer to Summer when he's talking about things they do together? Does he say Summer did it, or does he say we did it, or I did it? Like, how does he generally refer to it?
I don't know.
It really depends, because we see a lot of it through like Summer's eyes.
Mm-hmm. And he's usually saying, he. Here he's saying Summer. Like Summer in the third. He's talking in the third person here. Usually he's in the first person.
No, I mean, he says E. Like, I don't have the quotes from the previous chapters right now with me, but he's like, oh, but Summer did that and Summer did that. So I think that the third person is pretty consistent.
I'm kind of thinking I misread it now, though. Because
no, I'm not sure.
I can't imagine a night where Bran isn't trying to slip into Summer's skin when he goes hunting. So I can't. It's hard for me I think I read it before, like, oh, Summer's doing this himself, but why isn't Bran warging him? It seems like that's his favorite thing to do, is go off and be in the wolf, because he can run and jump and do all the things that Bran always wanted to do. Why would he take a night where he isn't doing that?
Because he's busy trying to warg into an eagle.
Yes. Okay. So that's the thing. Okay, I guess we can talk of all the warging occurrences. I mean, skin changing occurrences at once. Because you're right. Later in the chapter, for the first time, Bran tries to warg to skin change into an eagle, which I thought was pretty interesting. That is, he's already internalized totally the fact that his wolf dreams are a power that he has. Now he knows it, and so he wants to try to learn to expand his boundaries, to see how much he can do. We're not yet. I think it's in the next chapter that he skin changes into Hodor. I'm not sure if it's the next one or the one after.
It's the one after.
Yeah.
I mean, well, you know what I got though, because as I was reading that, I was thinking, like, isn't that Orell's eagle?
Oh yeah, I was wondering the same thing. They look alike, but it doesn't make sense timeline wise. Like I wrote the same note, like Orell eagle ? And quoting that it looks like Orell eagles.
Is that the only eagle in Westeros?
No, it's not. But it's funny because Bran is sleeping and Meera wakes him up to say, "Oh, look at the eagle," and so there they say, and where's the eagle? Well, they say he has gray wings. Where is that?
It could be Orell's eagle. I mean, eagles can fly far.
Yeah.
It is noted right after that in the chapter that eagles live here, so it conceivably could be either one.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's evidence either way to say. We don't get any sort of, not that we would, because it would just look like a party of 4 people traveling to Orell, but we don't get anything from the wildlings indicating that they've seen them. But again, why would they care?
They're still pretty far away from the wall at that point.
Yeah, we are.
So
pretty
that's
far.
why that was my first thought, Don Willie, but that's why then when I did a little bit of timeline research, it wasn't making a lot of sense.
Okay, so going back to the whole thing about Brandon thing, generally it's in like kind of like the third, but it's like a narrated third person. It's like someone's narrating for like what Bran is thinking. When Bran actually thinks back on what he was when he was Wolf, he thinks of it in the first person. Like when he's talking about eating frogs, he's thinking about how he's sick of it, and he's like thinking about the the deer he won the deer he got as Summer the other night, and he's thinking, I won that. He says, I won that. I won the fight for it. I won. So he's saying the word I when he's talking about when he was in Summer. He's using the first person. So I'm thinking that he probably wasn't warging into him at this point, but he might have been. It's possible.
Yeah, no, I guess, yeah, no, I mean, you're right. It depends on the interpretation. It's just I took that along with, so because of the chapter before and the fact that the same things mentioned, like bringing back food, and the fact that in that chapter he tries to skin change into a bird because he wants to fly. And then there was that, again, maybe it's certainly possible. I mean, I read Bran's chapter way too much, so I could be overreading things. But right before the story starts, okay, now I'm sorry, then I'm scrolling down my notes. Right before the story starts, there is that, there's that line where it seems like he's about to like sort of walk into Summer, but like doesn't want to because he's thinking, like Jojen warned me against escapism. So yeah, so it's the line as crony forehead. Bran could see the icy glitter of the stream where it tumbled down a mountainside. He found himself listening to Jojen's breathing and the crunch of pine needles under Hodor's feet. So again, I might be totally overreading it, but to me, like I feel like we have heightened perception. Like he's always mentioning how Summer can see far and hear very well and smell very well. And so like the fact that he's talking about things that he can see really from a distance, and that he's listening to like tiny little sounds. I read it, could be overrating it as like in like just in the process of slipping into Summer's skin, but thinking like, oh, no escapism. It's boring, but I must stay present.
But he does say, but Bran says he's seen him though. Him, not Bran himself, not Summer. So
no, I know. But if it's just the moment when he's like switching,
I think you're overreading.
Yeah, possibly. Because then he says, "Do you know any stories?" He asks the Reeds all of a sudden, like he really feels like weirdly, So yeah, I could be overreading it. You're right.
It happens when you read a chapter over and over and over and over again.
I know. I do the French chapter. I know, and I still have so many chapters I've never reread. I'm bad.
I think maybe overreading, but to me, one of the really interesting things about the Starks and their relationship with these wolves is it seems unconscious sometimes. Like they don't even sometimes know they're doing it, and they're all of a sudden getting the perception of the wolf. And
like Jon and Arya,
yeah, especially Jon. Yeah,
and it's almost like Bran is. It's pretty well accepted that Bran is more powerful than the others, and it could totally be that he's almost just kind of like slipping in and out without even realizing it for seconds at a time, and just picking up the odd sound, like I could totally see that being part of it as he learns to control it. That it's kind of he daydreams and it just kind of happens. Then he comes out.
He's in that. He even though they're different, he's both man and wolf.
I love fantasy and I love superpowers and all those stuff, but I think here it is more
He's wolf man.
I don't ordinary power. Bran used to be someone that was very active. He liked to climb, he liked to run. It's one of the reasons why he wants to warg into, Summer so much. But he doesn't have that anymore. Now he doesn't have his legs. He cannot be as active because he just doesn't have that ability anymore. And I think that sometimes when you have to adapt, you're forced to, do things differently. And I think it makes Bran an observer. And that's actually going to be part of his power, working into the trees and observing and learning. And, and to learn and to grow, you really have to start, really looking closely at things, seeing the details. And I think it's part of this growth. And I think that's also what we're seeing now, that he, really, he cannot move. He's stuck there. And unless he's with Bran, with Summer, the only thing that he has is his eyes observing and seeing, what surrounds him. So I don't think it's a supernatural thing, but more of a natural thing that, he doesn't have, he cannot go running and hunting and do all those kind of stuff. He's stuck sitting down. So observing is the other way that he can, really connect with what's around him. And that's how I saw it.
Yeah, Bran, going through his journey and just seeing how he's learning about the whole process of warging, what he's able to do, what he's not able to do, the experience that he gets through it, and trying to navigate through his mind in terms of like, what does it mean to him? How does it affect him when he goes back to being human? And especially on an emotional level, because the big reason why he likes warging in the summer is because he can feel more like his old self. But at the same point, he's got Jojen there that kind of keeps on, poking at him with, look, it's cool that you're doing this, and that's good that you're learning about your power, but at the same point, don't let this control you, because after a while you're gonna like doing that so much that you will forget who you are, especially if you stay in the wolf for too long. And it's just interesting to see like him kind of acclimating to this role of embracing the wolf side, because as you stated before, um, when he gets that elk or deer, he's like, I did that. It's like, oh, that wasn't summer, that was me. And so that kind of gives him a little bit more of that gives him more of a reason to keep walking in the summer. But when he's doing it unconsciously, it's just one of those things where he's not sure how to process the sensory overload to a certain extent, because it's like things will happen to him and he'll notice it, but he's just kind of like, all right, well, but what do I do with this? Because when he's not fully in summer, and not fully experiencing it for himself, it's one of those things where he's kind of like, well, yeah, I heard this thing, and they're like, all right, well, where was it? It was like, oh, I think it was over here somewhere, but I'm not exactly sure. And so he's still trying to find that perfect balance. And think about Varamir's six skins. I mean, Varamir was able to control 6 animals at a time. So I mean, we don't fully get the sensory perception of how he was able to see that, but I would imagine there was a symbiotic relationship that when things would happen to those animals, he would be able to pick up on it, and maybe not to the extent that Bran probably will at some point, but just the fact that he probably was able to interpret it better than Bran is right now. And the other Stark children, like when Jon, kind of is going back and forth with Ghost, yeah, he knows that things are happening, but for him, they're just kind of these weird dreams. And he's like, hey, I know something now. And it's just like, I don't know how I know it, but there was this thing that happened. And then I'm just wondering where's this going to lead for Bran in terms of him interpreting the I don't know, just interpreting how he's able to filter all of this information that's being given to him through not only summer, but once he gets into the trees and fully realizes what his power is. Like, how is that going to expand his understanding of how warging and skin changing works, and how he's going to actually be able to affect things?
Yeah, so much there between what you guys said. I just want to respond real quick. So, first of all, little grandfather is not stupid. He knows stuff. I don't know exactly what he knows.
He's hiding stuff.
He is for sure hiding stuff. We'll get to some of that later with the Night of Laughing Tree stuff. But I feel like he's terrified, to be honest. He's terrified of how quickly Bran is figuring this out. He's terrified at the power Bran has, and he knows that he needs direction. Trying to think of another example in pop culture or something, but it's kind of like if, I don't know, maybe Qui-Gon meeting a little Anakin and realizing how much power he had and being like, oh shit, I got to get him to the council and tell him about him or something. I mean, Jojen knows that Bran is exceeding everyone else at an alarming rate, and he knows that he needs to get him help quick. And so I think he's earnestly trying to keep him into these touch points with, scratch the tree, be in control, all these things, so that he can just make sure he doesn't just completely lose them. Right. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, now, you know what? We'll leave the second thing for later.
That's teasing.
Yeah, I do that.
So we're ready to move on to the mountain clans. So like we mentioned earlier, it's a an interesting chapter because we learn some things about the northern mountain clans that will be very important in Stannis's arc in A Dance with Dragons and possibly the Winds of Winter. So they're walking, Jojen, who apparently doesn't know that much about anything outside of the neck, is surprised that they never see anyone, and he asks if no one lives up there. And so Bran, touches on all the clans that are around where they're walking, because yes, Jojen kept on repeating, avoid the King's Road because people will look for us and betray us. But as we see, he just doesn't realize that there are a lot of people, and a lot of very well-informed people, where they're heading. So yeah, I don't know if you want to go over that, but he touches a little bit on all of the different mountain clans.
He does mention that they do sometimes get involved in the North politics because one of the Flints is his great grandmother, so they obviously come down and do marry, intertwine with the other houses. So
yes, and there's that mention. So yes, of Arya Flint with
the Wolves.
Yeah. Eddard Stark's mother, Theo Wolves, who I had totally forgotten, but was at the Tower of Joy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, go ahead.
There's sorry for cutting you off. So I was kind of looking at the Hill clans last night and evaluating why they're so loyal, and I ended up looking at the Stark family tree and going back a ways, and it's a who's who of northern families. You see Glover in there, you see Flint, you see Karstark a couple times, you see Manderley a couple times, Nori, Flint, Umber, Serwyn, or Kerwin, I'd say that, Locke. There's also some old god houses in the south that show up a couple times, Royce and Blackwood. Outlier, we can talk about that later maybe if we have time, but I can only assume that they've done it on purpose, ingratiated themselves and made themselves a huge part of the whole culture of the North. They want everyone to feel like they're a part of the ruling family, and so that inspires a loyalty just from the Jesus, I don't want to stab my cousin kind of mentality. But it's also more than that. Like they really, I think they really want to bring them in and make them feel a part of everything. From the side of Ned, traveling hundreds of miles away to actually visit them where they live, rather than having to make them come there sometimes. I think the Starks do a really good job of bringing that loyalty in. I would pay George or some surrogate of George everything in my savings account to just read more histories of the other Stark lords, because I just want to hear about what these men were like. I just want to know, were they like Ned? Is this like a family trait that all these guys are these kind of noble, good people? I know he's not perfect. I don't want to go down that road, but I'd love to just hear more about these Stark people and how they came to inspire such loyalty. It's evidenced in the family tree, but I want to know the stories behind it.
I think the loyalty. I was going to say, I think the loyalty comes out of Stark, like a lot of the Starkness, but I think a lot of Ned's honor and his kind of that comes from Jon Arryn. But the loyalty, even when it's bad loyalty, which is I guess why Ned is loyal to a fool like Robert Baratheon, comes from the Stark blood.
You know what name you never see in the family tree? Bolton.
Bolton.
Who
never
would
see it.
marry Bolton?
Well, that might be their. Yeah, exactly. If they were responsible, that could have avoided so much if they would have just married the Boltons. And the same thing actually happens later with the the Freys and the Tullys. If they hadn't treated Walder Frey, if they would have married within Walder Frey, you would have never had the Red Wedding, ever.
But you're not sure that they wouldn't have betrayed them earlier. You don't know if they would have married a Bolton, they would have just tried to kill and get, who knows? I with those people,
You make peace.
They may have. They may have. The point, the only evidence we really have is you look at the family tree and you see like virtually every name except Bolton, and you don't know whether that's indicative or shows behavior, like that they really slighted them in a lot of ways. But it's just a little. George operates in these ways sometimes. It's just like a little sliver that just shows you like, hey, they're excluded in this way. Maybe they're excluded in other ways.
They don't know how to make peace with their enemies. They only know how to make peace with their friends.
Well, no,
And you do get the point.
on that.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, because what I was trying to say was that one of the reasons why they've married so much with all those northern families was that, you know, they were not always the kings of winter. You know, they've been fighting for, I was going to say centuries, but more than that, for how many thousand of years they've been fighting surrounding houses until they became the kings of winter, the overall rulers of the north, like really the Starks of Winterfell. And yes,
I was going to say that's 100% true, but their biggest adversary has been the Boltons. So you would think the most treaty treaties would come with the Boltons and the most marriages would come with the Boltons, but we're finding out that's not the case.
Yeah, that's why there's got to be something. That's why I'm agreeing with Scott that there's got to be something special because was that, yeah, like the Flint, was that in that chapter? Or was that something I read when I did the research? I can't remember. But also like the Flints, they've intermarried because at some point they were fighting and there were two kings and then they married and then they were one big happy family. We hear the same thing about the Warg kings that were ruling over the Wolfswood. I don't know how many thousand of years ago. And that's where possibly their warging ability might have came from. They were fighting and then the peace resolved with intermarrying, and
it doesn't hurt to try at least. Like, yeah, sometimes it doesn't work. Like the Brackens and the Blackwoods, they intermarry all the time, yet they still fight like crazy. But it's not like it's led to the downfall of any of their houses. So it doesn't hurt to try. In some cases, it works, like the Flints. Good point.
Sorry,
we don't know if it's the Boltons that were making that difficult or the Starks. We don't have the full story.
Well,
I got a feeling it was the Starks.
History tells us, I mean, our own history, that, and I think George writes this well, there are people that are maybe have ill intentions, but in general, no one's bad and no one's good. Everyone is operating for their own, they're just from their own side of things, their own viewpoint. And the Boltons, you know, I don't know all the history, but I think they feel slighted about stuff. And from their perspective, there's shit been going on for hundreds of years, thousands of years, where they've been neglected and not taken, you know, they've been taken too lightly. And I'm not saying it excuses what they've done. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I don't think that they think of themselves as evil or bad or wrong. Everyone operates in from their own perspective, and they think they're doing the right thing for themselves and for their experiences.
Everyone's a hero of their own story. So
true indeed. I mean, listen, also think about this. You know, the Boltons were the Starks' kind of like number one enemies, right? And that's partially because if you look at the way that people talk about the Boltons, they talk about the Boltons as if they're like one step above savagery. You know, they talk about their history of flaying people. I mean, look at, you know, the way Ramsay has been acting. So it's just one of those things where
Dreadfort.
Exactly. You know, it's one of those things where I think because of the Bolton's reputation for brutality, I think that, you know, there may have been not just the Starks who never really pursued a marriage, but there may have been other houses who kind of protested against it. Like, come on, man, like them? Really? You're gonna marry one of them? Like, look at the things that they do. You know, look at the way that they live. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, the way that they
but
talk about them, you would imagine that the Boltons really should have been either on Skagos or that they should be more closely aligned with the Mountain Clan or something like that.
But that's when
those
you
things,
get
those things, though. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's where you get a strong leader that has the ability to compromise and like say, okay, I see your point. Let's bring them in and make them more like us. That's when you get a leader who can do something like that. Instead, you just have animosity building over and over, and it just comes to a fever pitch, actually.
And I'm not saying you marry them to the Lord. You know, you don't marry them to the Stark and Winterfell. You marry them to, you know, the third daughter to start, right?
The Rickons, the Brands.
You marry them in at a lower level and just start that peace building effort up low. But at some point, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you treat somebody like garbage for long enough, eventually they act like garbage. I had a friend, I've told this story in Dollar Singers before, but I had a friend in college who...
Nazis.
I'm not going to go that far, but I had a friend in college that we used to call Uncle Pete, Uncle Carl. His name was Pete. We used to call him Uncle Carl. Every time he got drunk, he would just like be this terrorizing, violent person. And eventually it got to the point where he felt like that was a role he had to play. He felt like he had to become Uncle Carl every time he got drunk because that was what was expected. The Boltons feel like they're outcasts, and so they behave like outcasts. And that doesn't excuse their behavior necessarily. It's within each of us to become the people we want to be. But if you cast somebody in a role for long enough, they're apt to behave in that role. That's the way people are.
But the Boltons were not excluded. Like, just because you haven't married them doesn't mean that they're excluded in anything. Roose Bolton was a general in Robb Stark's army. It doesn't.
I'm citing the family tree just as evidence, maybe, of exclusion. It doesn't necessarily mean it happened. It's just a little nugget that maybe George is giving us as a hint.
We haven't seen it.
You're right, though. It's
what we've seen. What we have seen is that their actions, even before, like, it's after the Red Wedding, when we actually start seeing all of the things that Ramsay has done, then we actually get to see them really as the bad guy. But even before that, there's a lot of evidence that these were not good people. Roose raped that woman and Ramsay, and there's a lot of evidence that they've always been this way.
But there's also evidence of the contrary with Roose Bolton's true son that Ramsay killed. He was very kind to Ramsay. He was like, he brought him in. He tried to be his son. Yeah, Ramsay backstabbed him and him killed, but that just shows that there are people like that within the Boltons. Maybe they're not coming out alive very often, but they exist. Yeah. So some of them would be, they would be a lord at some point.
What I do know is that if there's a house in which the tendency is to flay people, the flay man is the banner, maybe they didn't look like they were excluded, or there would have been more evidence of that, but maybe you don't want to bring that into your house. Maybe you don't want to bring that influence, because whether you like it or not, when you marry someone, that person is also going to be, you know, if you marry a daughter, or they're also going to be the parent of the next child. There's going to be someone who's also going to raise the next generation, whether you want it or not. You're not going to marry them, lock them in a room, and just go there to have sex, or just have the kid and then not have the influence. If these people have a tendency to have this kind of darker side that they did not approve of, maybe they just didn't want that influence to bleed into the next generations.
Well,
I wouldn't want that.
They got bad genes.
Not bad genes, but what you teach your children, what they learn. Children learn not only from what you tell them, but from what they see. You know, children aren't idiots. They see what their parents, they learn what their parents do, not what their parents tell them. You know, they learned a lot about Ned, not because of what Ned told them, but what they saw of Ned, what they saw of the actions of their parents. And if they see someone that acts a certain way, that you learn that. Maybe they didn't want to bring that into the family and into the children. I understand that. I wouldn't want my children, to learn. If I wouldn't want to marry someone that would teach my children bad influences and bad tendencies. I just wouldn't want that.
That's fair. I agree with that.
But there had to.
I think we were going to go into Bolton Stark rivalry history, did you? But I
happen every now and then. I carried away.
I agree with what you're saying, Tinker. I get it. In that case, and what you're saying is true that they have. I don't even know that they actually have this history as much as like tales and reputation.
Theorizing here.
But you're right. But if they really do have that history, then I think it was up to the Starks to exterminate the line. Get rid of these guys. If there are liege lords that are not living up to an expectation where you feel comfortable having them as liege as people underneath you, you should actually got rid of them.
That's what I've been saying all along.
But it's likely that's not true.
No, we don't know. We don't know. We're all.
And we have
right?
We have evidence that that's not the case because we have a good Bolton son. He did get killed, but we did have a good Bolton son. There should have been at least.
The last are the good ones. So
well,
let's kill all the bad ones that are left. Ram cannot be redeemed. Bruce cannot be redeemed. They're the only two left. Let's kill them all.
Look, there could have been a good son that lived throughout. There probably was, but we're talking about probabilities here. At some point, there would have been a suitable son they could have brought in. If you're that nervous, you bring in Neil Young to teach the children well, and then you're good.
Can we just all agree that we really, really, really need that Duncan next story, The She-Wolves of Winterfell?
I bet we have a good Bolton there.
Yeah,
but I am with Scott. I want to know more about the Starks, but not lords, kings. Because before the Targaryens came, they were kings for a long, long time, and we have rumors that they were more wild, more savage, more dangerous, but still being Starks. I want more of that.
We're told that.
Find enough authors, I'll read all of it.
Exactly. I agree with Scott completely. And we're told that Starks are generally more like Brandon than they are Ned.
Well, there's a bit of a mix of both.
They're people. They're individuals. I imagine they all have individual qualities. Yeah. That's why we need to read it.
Exactly.
More often than not, they're more like Brandon is the what do you call it? The prototypical Stark.
I agree a lot.
Maybe we should get back on track.
Sorry.
Do we move on to how badass that little is? So
we're going to bring these characters up in a little bit too, as well. So
but the little.
Oh, he was so nice. I loved seeing. You meet so many bad characters in this book. So many people that tried to steal or to this and to that, and just to meet a nice, kind man who kind of suspects who Bran is and what they're doing, and just gives them food and talks to them.
He doesn't suspect who Bran is.
No, he knows who Bran is.
Oh my God, he knows.
He might have sold them out afterwards. We don't know. We don't know what he was doing.
No, we know.
Yeah, no, I don't think he sold them out afterwards.
I don't think so either, but he could have.
I mean, he knew.
Don't be so negative.
No, but he knew what he was doing. That's obvious. Look, that dude is chilling in his cave, and you've quoted like all those things, and I was reading, and I'm like, how does he know that? Like, how does that dude chilling in a little cave knows all of that?
Well, he has been living in the cave all his life, I'm guessing.
No, but not all his life. I mean, may I remind you that it's been like a month since I left Winterfell, maybe a month and a half.
I'm not good at telling time in this book. He keeps jumping from a character to a character, and I completely lose all track of the timeline.
Well, then again, I mean, I can link that again in the description box. I'm not good. I have tools. I use good tools. I use a great timeline.
We actually don't know too much about this guy as well. I mean, Bran assumes he's a little, but we know Bran can be wrong at times. So who knows really what this guy?
I think it's Middle Little. I think it's Morgan Little. He has gold and copper.
Middle Little. I love that name.
I think he's got gold and copper or bronze, gold and bronze. Sorry, on him. Those are not the kinds of metals that are just given to just any little. I think it's Morgan Little. I think he knows exactly who Bran is, and I think he and the other Littles and other mountain clans have been shepherding this party through the mountains distinctly to keep them safe, to keep them off the road, and protecting them from any danger at all.
I agree completely. The only question is bloodraven middling with that. That's the only thing, bloodraven. I was thinking, but that's only true. Like all the things he knows what happened at the feast of the first man, beyond the wall.
Listen, when you bring time travel into it, a la Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and you literally know what's happening at any time, at any moment, you can do whatever you want. And so, when it comes to these books, you guys don't have to follow this rule, but when it comes to these books, I just try to not think about bloodraven because thinking about it blows me up. Like the possibilities are endless. It could be
You
anything.
think you're crazy.
Yeah. And Bran getting to the Weirnet as well. You know, like, oh, he actually told the Little to go meet them in the cave to meet little Bran to keep him away from the King's Road in the future when he got to the Weirnet and went back in time to make sure, like, your brain can just explode when you really think about all those things that could be happening.
That sounds so plausible though, because like he's sitting behind his fire. They're entering the cave, and okay, maybe Hodor had just been ordering, but Bran saw the orange glow of fire farther back and realized they were not alone. Come in and warm yourselves, a man's voice called out. I'm like, how did he see them? Like, how does he know? Like Bran can see the fire because it's very bright, but if he's has the fire in front of him, like, how? I don't know.
Maybe he heard them.
There was a tiny cave.
Maybe he heard them. There are quite a few. Direwolf, Coder. They're not exactly silent.
Yeah, horror is not. Yeah.
I don't know if we're gonna get any more about this particular character. I mean, he kind of pops up randomly here, and I mean, there's no kind of foreshadowing for him, and we haven't heard anything since. So, I mean, obviously, he's here to convey important information to Bran to help him along on his journey, but man, I don't know. It's difficult to tell. Like, other than that, I mean, like, was that his only purpose in the story? Was just to kind of tell Bran, "Hey, look, don't worry, I'm not going to rat you out to the Boltons, but also you got to be careful because the Iron Men are kind of all running around the north right now too. So just stay in the mountains. Oh yeah, and don't go to Castle Black because Castle Black probably isn't going to be safe either."
I was going to say he obviously has a connection to someone who receives ravens because he knows what happened at Castle Black from. Well, he doesn't know, but he knows that a raven came and it had no real message. I don't know. Someone told him or he was there. So, like someone told him who got the raven. I'm saying.
Definitely, but we like Mr. Eamon sends Raven to all of the mountain clans, so we know they all have a way to receive ravens.
Yeah, but I'm saying he's like probably like higher, like what Scott was saying. He's probably one of the major littles.
I agree with that. It's like the cloak with gold was gold and bronze. Not the cloak. The clasp was gold and bronze. Like, I don't see many mountain clanners having golden jewelry, so I totally agree.
I don't know what to say now.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yep.
Yeah, I just
actually. I'm not sure.
Very important line where Hodor says Hodor.
I think we can probably rule out that this guy was being influenced by bloodraven because he doesn't believe in dreams.
Yeah. Although that conversation is interestingly interrupted by Hodor saying Hodor just when maybe something can be said that's interesting. Like the way there's interesting conversation and then bam, randomly someone interrupts it, and he's always playing with that. So yeah, no, I agree with you. It's but I don't know, I felt like something important was going to be said, and then Hodor said Hodor. So that night Bran warged into summer. And and then he tries to warg. Then next day they left very nicely, left them cakes, and Bran swears that one day there would be a Stark in Winterfell again. Um,
You pay him
do you
back.
have do you have yeah do you have any idea? Okay, I mean I know it's not really relevant to that particular chapter, but very quickly, because that line made me thought of it. Like, why must there always be a Stark in Winterfell? What's your take on that?
I'm not sure, but I hope it actually means something to the world and that we'll get to know. Like, it's not something that they say that they... Because there's some things that he says that then he never later explains. And I hope it is something that he... You know, I hope there's something magical or something significant, something important about that, and that the Starks do end up back in Winterfell. That is that is what I hope.
I think I kind of agree. I think it has something to do with the pact between the Children of the Forest, but that's kind of the easy way, the easy thing to point to. So, anyone has anything more interesting, Scott? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I don't have anything. Gonna disappoint you, but I have hopes. I hope, like Tinker does, that it's something more than just a phrase to inspire loyalty with the families of the North. It's interesting because there are two kind of subjects in that sentence. There's Stark and there's Winterfell. It implies not just one thing that must be, but a combination of two things that must be, a Stark and in a specific location, which implies that the location is important. You've heard legends in A Song of Ice and Fire, or A World of Ice and Fire, rather, about dragon eggs potentially being somewhere. The crypts are huge and like cavernous, and maybe there's something special down there we don't really know. Great job, George, just kind of teasing us along with any number of possibilities.
And the hot water, how do you call it?
Yeah, the springs. Yeah, the springs.
Springs.
The hot springs. Yep. I mean, I hope it's something more than just a phrase. I don't have anything,
It's
but
like Excalibur.
It feels weighty. They're the only words that have weight behind them like that, right? So yeah, I hope so.
Like I say, maybe it's like Excalibur, where like the Starks and the Land are one or something. I don't know. Like Arthur.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys have read theories and stuff about the wall being tied to there being a Stark in Winterfell, the others being able to pass the wall being tied to there being a Stark in Winterfell, the fact that Bran the Builder was involved in the building of the wall, and the fact that that's all tied together. I mean, those are his original thoughts.
There's also, I mean, there's even theories about, well, was he really? Was he? Maybe.
Oh, sure, yeah. The prevailing theory is that he was, but yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff out there.
I mean, well, you know what?
I hope it's something. Sorry, go ahead, Don.
It's all right. I was just gonna say, I mean, with as many times as that particular thing has been mentioned about there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, there's obviously a reason for it, but no one other than probably the Children of the Forest know why that is, and I'm pretty sure.
Or bloodraven.
But I mean, you know what? Here's the thing. I mean, because bloodraven might be a descendant of a Stark somewhere through his Blackwood, somewhere through his like Blackwood lineage. He might be a descendant of a Stark somewhere, but
he's at least first man. So
right. So, but I don't know if he's necessarily paying attention to the Starks as much as he is to Bran in particular. So he may not really be looking that much into the Stark past to find out exactly why it is there must always be a Stark in Winterfell.
That's weird, though, because you'd think he would, considering how interested he seems to be in skin-changing powers, and Starks seem to be some of the strongest.
Right, but...
Also, he's very interested about the others and all that thing that is happening with them, and that we believe, or the theory is that there's a relationship there with Bran the Builder and the Starks, so...
Also that the Night King is a Stark.
Yeah, but
I mean, well...
time he tried to, have Euron Greyjoy as his former pupil, so we don't, like we don't know that much about, it could be full of shit saying, oh, Bran, I've been watching you for so long, blah blah blah. Maybe he just knows things because he has little spies.
He might be just a big fat liar.
He probably has been watching it for a long, because I mean that the Euron thing happened a long time ago, so he's had plenty of time to watch Bran for several years.
Yeah, but we maybe
What else is he doing sitting in that tree just watching?
I don't know. What worries me is the fact that if you want Euron Greyjoy as your apprentice, just this got to be something really wrong.
But it was when he was younger. It wasn't like now current Euron, and Euron failed too and went off his own Euron way.
Yeah, but he had already. How old was he when he killed two of his brothers?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It might have been after that. It might have been before that. I'm thinking it was before that. But...
It was before he left. No, there was something wrong on that map for a very long time.
Or that might have been who knows? That might have been the cause. It was like bloodraven tried to get into his dreams, and it's like a bad. Even though he went with good intentions, could have been a bad reaction. But we're getting off topic. We're going on Euron, so.
Yeah, so let's not excuse crazy people. Crazy people are crazy. Not someone else makes it crazy. Not all the time.
Sometimes guys can go into people's heads and fuck things up.
But not always, and that's not always a good excuse for crazy people. And yes, we are getting out of topic.
No, but it's always a good time to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it at this point. What I was referring to.
Okay, so before we get into the meat of the chapter, what you've all been waiting for, there's just a little bit of reminiscing about Winterfell and the way it was and what happened and with the time. And it's like there are a lot of very sad lines there. And, like, honestly, Jerry, as much as you say Bran is whining, and it's true that he's whining, that he's a cripple, he just watch his entire castle burn. It's just like, it's very real tough shit, and he stayed pretty strong throughout all of it, and he's not like, he's not constantly obsessing over it, like over all the horror that happened in front of his eyes. And even there, it's not like, oh, like everything burned, it's so horrible, blah blah blah. He's still hopeful, still like trying to find something he can do, and even when he ruminates, it's very bittersweet. Like there were some like really beautiful line, like that line from Meera. Remember old Nan's stories, Bran. Remember the way she told them, the sound of her voice. So long as you do that, part of her will always be alive in you. Like that's such a good quote.
Yeah, Bran could have been, so depressed, so angry, like so much worse than he is. And let's be honest, if we were in his situation, come on, let's see how we would deal, and at his age. And I love that he still has really nice thoughts. Like there's a moment which I really love here when after the little guy has left, and Bran is thinking, when we get back to Winterfell and I am, the Starks of Winterfell, I'm back, I'm gonna pay the littles for like every nut, I'm gonna pay them so much for this. Like he's thinking about how he's so grateful and how he's gonna give back. And I think that's also part of the idea what people are so loyal to the Starks, because the Starks are loyal back, and they're like, okay, you're gonna help me, but I'm gonna do it back once I'm back in my place. And I like that, because yeah, he does complain about some stuff, but he has a lot to complain about, and he doesn't complain as much as other people would have. Like, come on, it's a horrible, shitty situation. Like since the moment the Lannisters arrived in Winterfell, it's gone downhill for him. Well, for all the Starks, to be truthful. Like, he's like, oh, fuck you. You should have all stayed south and left us alone.
Well, does anyone think that Bran is possibly going to talk to some dead characters, more in the realm of kind of like an Obi-Wan Kenobi? Because, yeah, obviously we see him trying to communicate with his dad, but does anyone think that he is going to talk to someone in the present who is actually dead?
God, I hope so. That's always so interesting to read.
I think what will happen is you'll see, like, at the very end of this whole thing, you'll see Bran leaning up on a werewood tree, and he's just going to look out. And then you're going to see a ghost of Ned, Rob, and maybe John or something like that. I don't know.
You're.
Stop.
I've got no words, sir. I've got no words.
Stop.
I'm very like, yes, I think there's a definite possibility, but again, I have a hard time imagining it because, you know, time traveling in a story is like a sword without a hilt. It's very dangerous to use, so I can't really, like, I'm not a writer, so I can't really picture how a good writer would use it. But I think the possibility is definitely there. Like, again, because I think I'm not gonna harken back to the fucking Landis one that I've already discussed to death, but I think I've only touched on also a discussion about how I think that Bran's story arc is really taking from Campbell's hero's journey. I forgot the name of the book
Heart
now.
of Darkness?
The hero, yeah.
No. We're talking about the hero with 1,000 faces. And I thought George told you no already, like, specifically.
Yeah, George specifically, told me no. But
Well, there you go. There you go.
yes, I didn't talk to him, but I mean, no, he said, "Oh, I was."
I thought he said, like, you hit him up on LiveJournal, and he replied back saying, "No, I didn't do anything for Joseph Campbell. Maybe a little bit of Robert Campbell."
Yeah, okay, Robert Campbell. Yeah, I was thinking Scott Campbell. I don't know why, but yeah, he said, "Oh, the only Campbell I've been inspired by is." But again, like
How could anyone read Heart of Darkness and not be inspired by Joseph Campbell?
I mean, sometimes it can be, very dismissive in his answers. And okay, like, some people told me that in the past, like when he was writing in Game of Thrones, he was mentioning Campbell as being very influential for him. So I'm not gonna get into that. But the reason I was mentioning that is that in Campbell's book, there's that idea that, time is not something really linear, that it's more something circular. And yes, okay, the tinfoil glasses. Jared, you want to talk so we can see your glasses? Because they're not very visible.
I'm just listening. Keep going.
Okay, so time travel. Yes, I think there's that thing that time is a circle. I think we have all the things about history repeating itself. I think that the shitty things about the season might have something to do with that. And so, yes, I think like time travel can harken to that, but I would like to see how it's working. So anyone has anything to add about, maybe that quote by Jojen? Some people hurt others just because they can. Like, what the fuck? Ominous foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing for whom is the question.
Yeah, I was
Wait,
like,
say it again. What about Jojen?
oh, Jojen said, okay, because just before Bran said that he hopes Theon hasn't done anything bad to Olnan because she was so cute and only telling story, and Theon wouldn't hurt someone like that. And then Jojen replies, some people hurt others just because they can. And although it's not technically really the case of Theon, we know it's the case of fucking Joffrey, of Ramsay, of Euron. But could it be a foreshadowing for the person he's talking to? Maybe in the future when we get Dark Bran.
Could be.
Well, also
You
thinking
seem
about the
way
fact
too
that,
happy about that possibility. Sorry, go ahead, Dom.
well, I was going to say, think about the fact that the word "others" is in there. Because if
some people hurt others just because they can.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about it. If the White Walkers are truly the bad guys, but Bran is like, yeah, but you did this stuff, so fuck it, I'm gonna, just start, killing you guys are hurting you. It was like, hey, some people hurt others just because they can. I mean, what if the White Walkers aren't attacking and he just goes all dark side and decides, yeah, but you've done stuff in the past, so now because I can hurt you, I will.
Or maybe they'll be like the others we see are the bad others, and then there's like a set of good, peaceful others, and Bran goes crazy Scion War abilities, turns into like Anakin, and he's like, you attacked us, I'm gonna go and wipe all of them out, even though they're innocent.
Maybe you're all going crazy and theorizing too much, and it's much more simple. He's afraid that Theon is going to hurt other people, and the one who gets hurt just because someone can hurt him is Theon. He's the one who gets all mutilated and tortured and stuff by Ramsay just because he can.
So this is the bit where
true, but there's no fun in that.
This is the bit earlier where I said, well, maybe I'm going too fast and I'll do it later. But I think Jojen he's not just worried about not being enough for Bran. He's actually scared of where Bran could go. And there isn't enough here, to be honest. This is nothing but the musings of me becoming a madman. But
I love that already.
The fact that he's saying some people hurt others only because they have to, you got to remember, good writers, and I think George is one, he puts words in people's mouths that mean something. And he wouldn't be saying this to Bran if it didn't convey something that he felt Bran needed to hear. You have to remember that Jojen is a figure to Bran that is someone that he looks up to, someone that he respects his knowledge and his wisdom more than his knowledge, I suppose. And I feel like Jojen is trying to issue a warning. What happens right after this? And I can't remember. Did they get interrupted? Because I feel like there's more that Jojen needed to say. Because what he needed to follow this up with is compassion is important. Empathy is important. You shouldn't hurt others. All these kinds of things. And I think he's worried about taking on too much of a role because he knows somebody else will do a better job. Hear it.
No, he's not interrupted. It's just Meera saying, and it wasn't Theon who did the killing at Winterfell.
Yeah, that's when we find out it was. She makes us aware that the people burning it was someone other than the Ironborn. And then you combine that with the bastard stuff earlier, that the Boltons are still around. You can kind of figure it out that it was the Boltons.
I sort of agree with you, Scott, because he does have a great power. He's gonna have a lot of power, and right now he's young, and he's been hurt a lot. He's been crippled after being thrown out of tower. His family is gonna be almost decimated. His castle burned, and rage and hate are very, very dangerous, and vengeance can also be very dangerous. And add that to a power that is so great, because then he can work on Hodor. But then what if he can start warging into everyone and anyone? And then, what happens when he can control everyone, he can control anyone. And then you start thinking, oh, well, I can do it just for a little bit. Then, oh, but this is necessary. And then, once you start crossing lines start to disappear, and then you stop thinking of them as people, and it can be very dangerous. It can be a very dangerous way to go. But at the same time, he's a nice kid now, and you cannot tell him, be careful, because you can become the overlord of the world and destroy everything. But I can see where Jojen could see a danger in all that power.
Yeah, it can this phrase can either be seen as just kind of a throwaway thing from Jojen, like it's trying to explain what happened at Winterfell, or it can be seen as a warning to Bran and an attempt at a teaching moment, even though Jojen's a bit out of his league to teach, a teaching moment, depending on how you feel about Jojen and whether he's really got all this wisdom or whether he's just a kid that doesn't know much more than anyone else. You could probably interpret it either way.
I believe it's a bit of both.
Yeah, perhaps.
Let's Jerry. Are we ready to move on to the story?
Yes, let's get into the story.
And so I have a very long introduction. Before we start into the story, you love my very, very long introductions. Okay. Oops, not on the right note. So, um, I think if I'm not mistaken, if I am, stop me right there. That uh, the Tale of the Night of the Laughing Tree is the longest story within the story that we see in A Song of Ice and Fire. And that is being even, I would say, unusually long. It's more like there's in the literary tradition, there are a couple of styles of novels that rely heavily on stories without the story within the story, such as picaresque novels. But for like half of the chapter is the Tale of the Night of the Laughing Tree, which is really, really long. So I'd like to take a moment just to talk a little bit about meta-analysis of the chapter and examine how the story of the Night of the Laughing Tree interacts with the main narrative. Before I move forward, I would like to say that doing my research, I stumbled into a really great essay that talks about that. It's Game of Text, how far does the story of the Night of the Laughing Tree interact with George R. R. Martin's epic A Song of Ice and Fire by Sophie Hinterdorf? That's actually a college paper, and I'll try to link that in the description box. So a lot of it is not from me, but from her and her essay. So as we know, there are just checking that I'm not muted and I've not been talking forever muted. So there are many songs and stories within the world of Ice and Fire, which is great, not only in terms of world building, because it makes Westeros seem more realistic, but that also often gives us extra information, either to inform us of the past or to foreshadow the future. In the case of our present tale, the reader soon realizes that it's a mix of folk tale and historical account. Um, as it is characteristic of modern fantasy, Martin uses a certain strategy of medieval romance, such as wandering, idealization. That's the fact that certain characters are immediately perceived as being either good or bad, obscured identities, the marvelous, and narrative delay. And all of those characteristics that we find in the Song of Ice and Fire as a whole, we do find them also in that small excerpt of the Night of the Laughing Tree. So, for example, Wandering, that's the whole opening of the story where we hear about the little Crichton man's travel. Then Idealization, we have on the one side the little squires, they're just bad little squires, and on the other end the Starks, they're very good and noble, and especially the she-wolf was very nice. uh Obviously we have obscure identity, we don't know, I mean the whole tale revolves around the mystery of who the Knight of the Laughing Tree is, but also all the characters in the story are not named by their name, but are described by symbols. And while the Marvelous, we don't have so much of the Marvelous except for maybe the mention of the Green Man. And well, in the narrative delay, we find also like we're going to see that as we study the tale closer, but Meera starts to talk about something, and then Bran interrupts her, and then she talks about something else. So all of those uh, now I find the word in French in my head, and I can't find the word in English, but all of those writing tricks or
Themes?
things,
Oh,
procédés littéraires, for anyone speaking French, are found throughout A Song of Ice and Fire, but also like concentrated in that little story, and it's very, very, very interesting. And this story can be regarded as kind of a flashback within Martin's epic, but as with most of them, think about like Ned's or Cersei's dream, they're not straightforward recounting of the fact. So I think like once we've studied that story, we're also going to do a little bit of comparison with the way the Tourney of Harrenhal is told in the World of Ice and Fire. Okay, I had given Jerry a task, which was to pretty much like rewrite the story with all the actual name. Like, can you give us a quick summary of the story as if it was told by a maester and not if it was not a tale?
I can't wait to see who the White Sword is.
Wait, you did? I don't remember this.
Oh yeah, you never remember when I asked you to help out.
Mm-mm. Well, I remember you talking about the White Sword being Lewin Martell, right? I don't remember this whole tale. You sure you want me to do it?
I don't know. I asked you to do it a while ago, but no, I can just read the story from the Westeros forum.
Hold on. We're gonna have to edit this if you want me to do it.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not gonna edit anything in the middle of a video that I'm gonna have to search for 2 hours of it's gonna be rough. Okay, according to Meera's tale, a Krennic man, most likely your own father, attended the tourney at Harrenhal.
That was Howland Reed.
Thank you. That was very mysterious. Okay. Attended the tourney at Harrenhal, finding there Aerys II, the king, Rhaegar Targaryen, the dragon prince. With the Targaryen were the King's Guard, the White Swords, there to welcome Jaime Lannister, a new brother, into their ranks. Based on their known composition at the time, the knights present would be the Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, John Arthur Derry, Arthur Dane, Lewin Martell, who, I was right, was in the King's Guard and was at the tourney. Barristan Selmy and Oswald Wentz. Among the present lords in the tourney were Robert Baratheon, the Storm Lord. I thought, do you agree that it's Robert? Like, I thought when they mentioned the Storm Lord, was Stefan already dead at that time?
No, Stefan died looking for a bride for
oh yes, of
Rhaegar.
course.
So he'd been dead for a while.
He's dead. Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why
Right.
Robert got sent, I think, no? So he could be kind of raised.
No, he was going to be sent regardless. But the fact that Rhaegar's married to Elia is shows that that's already his search already happened. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, shocking lack of knowledge. So Mace Tyrell, the Rose Lord, notably absent was Tywin Lannister, the Great Lion on the Rock.
Pissed.
Yes. Among the women present were Elia Martell, the wife of the Dragon Prince, and a dozen of her lady companion. Walter Went of Harrenhal hosted the tourney. His daughter reigned as the Queen of Love and Beauty at the opening of the tourney. Through her title had to be defended against challenger. Her champions were her four brothers and famous uncle Oswald Went. So
Everyone get that? Good.
What?
Thanks,
I said
Jerry,
that
for your
everyone-
contribution. I appreciate you doing that for us.
I did let y'all know it was Howland Reed.
Yeah. But I'd like, because Jerry was all snarky saying, but everyone should know from the tip of their tongue who all those guys are.
I mean, if I had the summary with all the nicknames, I could match the nicknames.
Yeah, but I thought, you just, because I thought you were going to do that.
Like, I don't even have the summary of the story, so.
Okay, so basically, the Crown Man is bullied for whatever reason by three squires.
The reason is because some people hurt others just because they can.
Yes, thank you, Scott. And because they're just prejudiced little twats. So they're the squires of
Frey, right?
Yeah,
House Hay, House Blunt, and House Frey.
Thank you. Then arrives the she-wolf, Lyanna Stark, who chases them with a thorny sword. And kicks some major ass. Then she invites Howland to join them in the tent. They go to the party. A lot happened during that party. Robert wins a drinking contest with Richard Longmouth, and Rhaegar.
You mean lemon cloak?
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe.
very possibly.
Maybe.
Maybe. We don't know. And
What a way to impress your betrothed. Get super drunk.
yeah. Rhaegar sings a very beautiful and sad song that makes Lyanna cry, that makes Benjen laugh, and she pours wine over his head. And for the anecdote, that is LT's, who couldn't be with us today, that is LT's favorite part in the chapter. And then there's some dancing, and then all the eyes are turned on Ashardane, the most beautiful woman there, who dances with Uh, so yeah, a member of the King's Guard. So Arthur Dane or Barristan Selmy or maybe Lewin Martell. Secondly, Oberyn Martell, the Red Snake, then John Connington, the Lord of Griffins, and then Eddard Stark, but only after Brendan asked for him because he was too shy. Then
They did the shy brother routine.
yes, and we'll
Good
talk.
cop, bad cop.
We have an ongoing debate about that, but maybe I'm thinking that Don Willie might have changed his mind.
No, Don Willie's seen the 5 parts. He knows how that shy brother routine works.
So during this feast, both the Crown Man and Lyanna recognize the 3 bullying squires. So the next day, she points them out to her brothers. Benjen offered to find the Crown Man a horse and an armor in order to avenge himself. He failed to reply, torn with indecision. His pride demanded vengeance, but he was afraid of losing and making a fool of himself, bringing shame to his people in the process. He was no knight and was not used to horses and lances, and horseback riding is the most important thing in a tourney. So before going to sleep at the tent of Eddard, he prayed to the old gods to find a resolution. So we don't know what happened, but during the first 2 days of the tournament, the knights from House A, House Frey, and House, you just said it,
Here?
Blount,
Blount.
like Boris Blount, yeah, win the first round. And late in the afternoon, the second day, a mystery knight, short of stature, appears in the list.
One thing, I think we got the first mention of Jojen being a little shocked that Ned never told this story. He's like,
yeah.
You sure you haven't heard this from your dad?
No,
You
but
sure?
I want to touch on that, like once I've summed up like pretty much what happened in the story, because all of those things. So he's short. His armor is made of mismatched armor, bits and pieces. Well, anyway, I'm trying to sum up the summary of that. So he defeats all 3 knights. He asked them not for a ransom, but to teach their squires some courtesy, and then he disappears. That makes the king very, very angry, and he sends his knight to look after him. But when the next day, the mystery knight, doesn't show up anymore. And yeah, the angry Ares sent Rhaegar to search for the vanished knight, but only his shield could be found abandoned in a tree. And that's not how the story ends. The story ends with... No,
Well, actually, hold on. It looks like Robert and claims that he would on Matt, like he claimed that he was openly he did an open challenge.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Robert and Richard Longmouth both did that. And no, I thought it was at the end of the story was a crowning, but it's not at the end of the story. It's earlier than that. So yeah, that's pretty much the summary with all the names put back together. And so one of the most striking thing, again, in that tale is that we know Bran knows a lot of heraldry. We've seen
Oh,
that throughout.
did you mention that Rhaegar was sent to after Robert and Richard Longmont failed? That Rhaegar was sent to go look for the Laughing
Yeah.
Knight.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
I didn't catch that.
and end of the chapter. The chapter ends with the story, with the end of the story. So, and one thing, so I'm sorry, that was very rambly, but one thing that we easily did as readers was just replace the symbols by actual characters. And we know that Bran knows a lot about history, about heraldry. He was always a good student, listening to the Master Lewin's teaching of that. He's really good with that. But not once does he try to understand who the characters are. The only one he's obsessed with are the phrase. He's still like, he's not even mad at Theon. He's not even mad at, Reek. He's just still really, really mad at Big and Little Walder Frey. And it's quite interesting that not once Bran cares about that. He really
I do have to say one thing about that
Yeah.
about Bran not caring. I always I don't like Bran and his whining and all that stuff, but I do have to say I understand where Bran is coming from here, because I remember when I read this the very first time, I was like, I didn't even think that these characters were the ones that we knew of. Like I figured it was some old tale that they were just telling, and I was actually kind of trying to get through it as quick as possible because I wanted to read more of the immediate stuff going on, and I could see why Bran would think the same thing. He probably didn't even, the thought didn't even come into his mind that we're talking about his father and his aunt and his uncle hearing this. So I will defend Bran on that, thinking of it's just an old tale, kind of not important, and wanting to get through it.
I don't know.
Hold on 1 second, Scott. I would just like to make sure to mark down the date and time that Jerry defended Bran. Okay.
Done and done. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember, Jerry. My memory isn't that good. I don't remember whether I related this stuff right in the moment or not. But I feel like if somebody had used a symbol that I recognized as the symbol of my own family, that I the term wolf is used
Good,
the symbol of his
you're
house.
breaking out a little bit. Can you just repeat that?
Sure. All the way back to the beginning?
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that I remember what I knew and what I thought when I read this the first time, but I don't. But I feel like if somebody had been telling me a story and used a symbol of something that I associated with my very own last name and house, that my ears would have pricked up and I would have been like, that's weird. They're talking about wolves. Direwolf is my house. And I feel like I would have asked more questions. I really think I would have.
But how many stories do you think he's heard of about old Starks? He's probably heard countless.
Well,
But this is a new one, and he's a kid that's fascinated by stories.
not only that, one of the things that kept popping up is that's, for me, it was kind of like a sign, is that both Jojen and Meera both tell him, you know this story, they've told you, and then there's a moment with Jojen actually stops and says like, but really your father hasn't told you about this story? It's mentioned at least twice.
Yeah, it's mentioned twice.
And when it's something that he it's not even similar, it's nothing that he can even recognize, it's not even similar to any other story, but both of them are so convinced that he should know the story, and he recognizes Harrenhal. It just, there were too many times that there's like, we've heard another story about Harrenhal as well, with all of these people.
It's mentioned actually, I think 3 times. Once he's like, "You sure your father hasn't told you the story?" And then again, when they get to the laughing tree part, he's like, "Well, you definitely know, but you definitely heard about the laughing tree." And he's like, "No, I haven't heard about that either." He's like, and then at the end of the story, he's like, "Are you really sure you've never heard of this story?"
I know, like it's 3 times repeated to you. Then you're like, well, this has to be more than just some ordinary story.
Look, I was tranced when I read this book. I missed that. Okay.
Here's the problem I have with the whole thing. Meera and if I'm jumping way far ahead, just shut me up.
Oh no, now we're all talking about anything at the.
All right. Meera and Jojen know shit. They know this story. They know more than they're letting on in this story. They know what's the quote? He says something like, whether it were green men or ghosts or gods or whatever that made it happen, they know exactly what happened. Their father's the Crannogman. He told them this story, and they know exactly what happened. And they're not telling the details to the person that needs to know them. They're choosing not to, for some reason.
It's so frustrating.
No, I was just gonna say, I was agreeing with you and saying that even what happens on the Isle of Faces, did he meet a green man? Yes, said Meera, but that's another story and not for me to tell. My prince asked for knights. So they know something and are not telling.
Yes.
Yeah, well, they also said that again.
Hold on. Deliberately not telling. That the green men thing is one. There's multiple things where Bran's calling out questions. And they're like, nah, I'll leave that out for now. They specifically be vague within the story to leave things out for some reason. And we'll get to maybe some of those reasons a little later.
Why do you think that they're being so vague? Why not just tell him? It would drive me crazy.
Well, maybe we'll get to those reasons now.
Well, it's because that's how he writes. Well, I don't know. As far as
it's because he's a big
in character they're doing this, I don't know. Maybe they've been. Well, I mean, they probably have been told by their dad what's up, and they have said you can't tell anyone this. And he's probably stressed the importance of not telling anyone because it could cause war. It could cause. Well, at least will cause Jon to die. Possibly more. Possibly even more.
They're all by themselves. It would only be Bran who they would be telling, and Bran would not endanger Jon, and they could die at any time. So someone else kind of needs to know this information because
they're afraid of being captured. You know, okay, they're on the road. If they're captured by Bolton, and the Bolton tortures them, they're gonna,
Yeah, but then that was the difference between 2 and 3. Like they're as much likely to learn all the information
as
Jon.
They're also cautious with Bran too.
They are cautious with Bran, but here's the interesting thing. I don't hear a lot of people point out. They didn't have to tell him this story. Bran asked for a story. Meera chose to tell this one. It's like they want him to know parts, but not all of it. It's weird, man. I don't have an answer, really.
Well, but at the same point, they were both convinced that he would know that story. So they didn't actually think that this was new information in a way.
It was obviously more for them than it was for Bran.
Maybe they were just trying to see how much he actually knows. See, they've got so much information that they have to start giving him and teaching him. They also have to start by knowing how much he knows.
They also might really trust Ned. Sorry, why did I call him Nedard? Eddard. They also trust Eddard. They probably trust Eddard's judgment very well. They probably don't want to step up. Like Eddard chose not to tell Bran for some reason, and they're probably like calibrating to see. Okay, if Ned told them this, then we could maybe open up a little bit because that trust Ned's decision, trust Ned's choice. That's what their father, like Howland Reed always trusted Ned, so they would trust Ned too. Maybe then they're like, okay, Ned didn't tell him this story. Maybe Ned's trying to keep it a secret. We'll do what Ned thinks is best. Maybe they're just trusting Ned.
That whole thing is a little weird with Ned and Howland because we hear over and over within this story about how much Ned trusted Howland, and Rob says at some point, "My father knew the value of Howland Reed," and we get the feeling that they're bosom buddies, they're good friends. But you get the sense that Howland and the Reeds are never around. They don't come to Winterfell. I think they mentioned in one of Bran's chapters how long it's been since the Howland Reeds since the Reeds paid their respects at Winterfell. It's. I don't think I'm breaking any news here or whatever, but like it's almost like there's a rift. It's almost like Howland and Ned disagree about how much information should be available.
I don't think so. I mean, you can tell from this story they just don't come out very much. They're different from the rest of everyone, so they just don't.
The why is the question.
Well,
the why though. The why is the question.
Well,
maybe their cultures just don't mix as well. I mean, because this is long before Ned and Howland. This goes back, generations on why they.
Well,
hang in their place.
Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I always had the idea. But there's only two that really know, or we believe that there's only two people who really know the entire story.
I think Meera and Jojen both know.
Well,
yeah, I think so too.
It's yes, but when did he tell them? At one point, did he tell his children? Before they went to Bran, so they would know before the journey started. Or has he told them, we're not exactly sure. I always got the idea.
Why does that matter?
Very well. The way they tell them, it's a story they know very well. It sounds like, okay, Scott, you know theater, you gotta agree. It's almost like it's rehearsed. They're trying to get some reaction from Bran the way they're telling the story. It's very, very, very well written. Not just the story, but all the narrative structure of the story.
The way it's told, yeah.
And Tinker, I gotta ask, why does that? Why do you think that matters? Whether when he told them, or if he told them when they were 5, 7, 10, what 12? What does it matter when he told them? I'm just curious what you think on that.
This is just my idea, and it could be absolute bullshit, and it could be absolutely nothing. But I always had the idea that in a way, Howland was the person that was hiding all the secrets. Ned had to be the Lord of Winterfell, had to keep on with his life, had to keep hiding Jon. But if anything ever happened to him, he wanted someone else that would be safe, that would be hidden, that would know all this information, that would be able to hide Jon or to take action or to do something. If anything happened to him, the Reeds and, Greywater Watch is kind of hidden. They even say there in that or another chapter, if you go there, you could try, but you'd never find it. Eventually you'd drown. They've got their own magic. So maybe it's just my idea, but I always had this idea that that Howland was hiding there, and kind of Ned hid all the secrets there. And then maybe Howland kind of taught his children, because he also, I don't know if Howland also has the dreams like Jojen, or knows through Jojen something about the dreams, but that he kind of taught them all the secrets that were kept hidden in Greywater Watch while Ned kept ruling the North, because Ned couldn't just afford to disappear and hide Jon. He had to rule the North, had to have his family, had to keep ruling stuff. And that, there he kind of taught Meera and Jojen so that they would, keep the secrets, and then later on help guide Bran, or maybe Jon, or maybe, guide whatever happened, or whatever, if something happened or whatever, or something happened to Ned. And as we've seen, it has happened something to Ned.
That makes me think now, actually. Maybe Ned actually had some other plan for Jon, because if you really just wanted to hide a kid out and keep him safe and make him forget it, send him to the Reeds. No one will ever find Jon if he grows up there.
But, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the story that Jojen had a dream of the bound wolf, and that he told his dad, and that his dad said, okay, you and your sister have to go see Brandon Stark?
Well, Rob also called the banners too, so that's part of it as well.
Yeah, okay, it's in the Clash of Kings that they say that, but I don't know, I vaguely remember something like that. That it's
Yeah, I remember that.
I
The Bound
probably
Wolf.
heard it in Davos fingers.
I doubt it. We're not that in depth. But yeah, I remember that, the Bound Wolf, and it was something that Jojen dreamt, and I think it was like a call out to Howland that they needed to go, and they didn't come when they called the banners. They ignored it. The banners were called. They didn't do anything. That's part of. I mean, I don't know. They are very much a group that stays where they are, but they didn't come when the banners were called. They stayed. I'm not sure that all things are as well as everyone lays out between the Reeds and the Starks.
Could be. I mean,
I
we won't know until we meet with Howland Reed and what he thinks. Go for it, Don Willie.
I mean, you know what though? I mean, the thing that you got to think about here. Remember, the Reeds, are supposed to be part of the people who protect the southernmost border of the North from any southern invasions, and part of how they've been able to do that is because of the whole magic that they possess, the moving castle, etc., etc. So, I mean, I doubt that there's any kind of animosity between them, because remember, Ned thinks about how if it wasn't for Howland Reed, that he would have been killed by Arthur Dayne, right? And I just somehow doubt that after all this time, that if Ned had any kind of animosity towards Howland Reed, or if there was any issues between the two, that he wouldn't have at some point, either told Catelyn or Rob or somebody, hey, like, you know what, out of all the people, I can trust, House Reed isn't one of them.
Well, okay.
Animosity is too strong. Sorry, I want to address it real quick because I think I led to something I didn't mean. Animosity is way too strong. I don't mean that they like disagree and started a blood feud, or like Howland and the Reeds are no longer going to do their job protecting the border. I mean specifically that they disagreed about this secret and what to do with it, and not that he didn't trust him, or not that Howland wasn't still loyal and maybe even the most loyal. Just that they disagreed about this thing and how to deal with it. That's all.
There's also several things that could have happened in between. Like from the time that Arthur Dayne dies, from Howland Reed killing, we have the tower. Ned going in the Tower of Joy. You promised me, Ned.
Whoa! Did that happen? Do we know that?
We know that from his dream in Game of Thrones.
Howland killed him?
Oh, I don't know who killed him.
Someone
we only know is that he would have been killed.
Whoever. I
want to so imagine Howland Reed killing Arthur Dayne that I want that to be real. Is that real?
Someone killed Arthur Dayne, because I don't believe Arthur Dayne's alive. I mean, I'm saying someone killed Arthur Dayne, and then from that point on, we believe that Ned went into the Tower of Joy, had the promise thing. That's one situation right there that they could have a disagreement on. Then they got to deal with the Don, the sword. That's another thing they could disagree on. Their friends' bodies. That's another thing that they could disagree on. Going all the way to Starfall and dealing with whatever happened there, we still don't know. That's something they could disagree on. And then heading back and deciding what to do from there. That's also, there's just like several decisions that they could be disagreeing on, and it could be a thing where, like, man, he's really pissing me off about this whole decisions here, but he saved my life. And it's like, kind of like the beginning. There's love and hate going on there.
Yeah,
same time.
You ever have that friend where, like, your friends forever, but there was some moment in your history that made it awkward.
Yeah, and it's not the first time that happened with Ned.
Yeah, if it were important, they've got your back. You know that for sure. Mm-hmm. But there was something that happened in your history that just makes it awkward, and you just don't talk much anymore.
I agree 100%, and that's actually what happened between Ned and Robert with the whole murdering of the children. And the only reason things got unawkward was the death of Lyanna. If Lyanna never dies, things might still be awkward with them.
I don't know. I just hope that we'll get Howland in the next book.
No, we're not getting it until Dream of Spring.
Oh,
I don't want him at all.
don't be such a pessimist. You don't want him at all? Why not?
I kind of see Scott's thing, like the mystery about it, the whole thing is kind of great. Like we don't need to always have everything completely spelled out. It's okay to show us
I do.
80% and a little cloudy.
I do. I need 110%. Why
I know you do.
What? Why do I not want it?
Why don't you want Howland Reed?
Well, first of all, I don't know that it matters. What Howland Reed really has to declare mostly affects Jon, and I don't know that Jon cares. And second, if somebody's going to tell that story, I'd actually like to hear it from the kids. I'd like to hear it from Meera.
There you go.
Yeah, but they don't.
We don't even need that story, to be honest.
I think they know it all. I don't have any evidence, but I think they do.
But I want to meet Howland Reed. We've heard so much from him. And hearing a lot from a character and never seeing him, just no. If it's just
you heard it in this chapter. It's just Jojen, but a little bit older.
Sometimes stories are better left. Sometimes stories are better left ambiguous too. That sometimes can be wonderful writing. Sometimes, and this could be a case of that. Don't be such a pessimist, Tinker. It can sometimes be good.
Don Willie, I would like to hear your opinion on that topic because you've been eerily quiet.
No, I've just been listening to you guys' thoughts on this one. Okay, so, man, all right. The whole thing with the Reeds, and in terms of telling the story that the way that they have, one, with not mentioning the names, and then two, that it's kind of being conveyed. And okay, cool was that? But anyway, the way that it's kind of being conveyed secondhand to Bran, and the fact that they're kind of shocked by the fact that he isn't even aware of the story, just kind of it puts you in a place where it's like, all right, well, what is the story itself trying to tell you about the way that we perceive the story, like the larger story, but then also B, it's like, all right, why did Ned not want to tell his children about this? Because Meera and Jojen seem pretty excited by this whole thing, and they're like, oh no, this is, come on, you're in the stories, like, how did your dad not tell you about this? It's not a thing where they're sitting there like, I don't know if we should tell the story or not, because if that was the case where they felt it should be something secret or something that could lead to some problems, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have mentioned it to begin with. But then also, there's the whole thing of, what has this family been doing for all this time? Because really, Bran doesn't, like, even when they show up to Winterfell, he's not sure of who the Reeds are or what they stand for. He's heard things about them, and then you have the phrase, and they're like, oh yeah, the frog eaters and all that stuff, and obviously, they probably have heard their own version of those events to a certain extent, because like, yes, they're not too far in terms of where the border is, and so they might have little skirmishes here and there, but I'm pretty sure that the phrase have heard a little something about that whole instance at the tourney. So this is just one of those things where, unfortunately, until someone steps forward and says, hey, here are the concrete facts of what happened, it's going to be one of those kind of little mysteries that's going to keep us having these conversations. And seriously, I don't know, Scott, why you don't want to meet Howland Reed. I mean, he saved Ned. We want to know how. We might not get any other perspective as to how it was that he actually saved Ned. We might not get that through the weirwood tree, so it might be up to Howland to tell how exactly it was that Ned was saved from being killed by Arthur Dane.
Well, like the Night of the Laughing Tree, I feel like Howland probably told that story to Meera and Jojen, and I feel like he can be relayed that way. I just don't bringing Howland in now. It's like, where is he? He's in the neck. Who's he interact with? Is he, riding another skin boat south or north to tell somebody something? It feels like another thread to open when I feel like probably I feel like Howland is, I don't know why, again, we never met him, but I feel like he's been very open with his kids about everything that went down. The exact opposite of Ned, who's been like, fucking bury it, just leave it down there. At some point we'll bring it up later and we'll explain everything. I feel like Howland's like, the truth will out, you need to know, let's just make sure somebody knows this story, and that they're opposites in that respect. Maybe even I said that they differed in the way they wanted to handle this. Maybe Ned left that to Howland. Make sure this legacy lives on, Howland. Make sure somebody knows. Make sure your kids know. It's your kid's job. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. I just know that the Reed kids seem informed, whereas Ned's kids were purposefully left in the dark.
I agree.
And I'd like to hear it. I'd like to hear the story. I just feel like Meera can tell it. I think she knows it.
Also, Don Willie, I'll expand on why I kind of don't want Howland Reed to come out, because sometimes things are, when they're really well written, they do a really good job of leaving things out and letting the reader's imagination take over and fill in those blanks, if that makes sense. And sometimes, sometimes when you go back and try and do those blanks, fill that, it doesn't match what your imagination crafted, or it's not nearly as good. I think a good example of that would be at least for me, was like the Star Wars trilogy, like learning about Darth Vader's whole fall, his whole fight on the volcano planet, all of that.
That's not comparison. That's not.
Let me finish.
Atrocity. They were badly done. You get something is well written, then just because then you go into detail, it doesn't mean that it's going to be garbage.
It doesn't necessarily mean, but it could be.
It just means that George Lucas went crazy in power and just, come on, the second one is the best of the original trilogy, and he didn't direct or write it. He was great at the idea, but not at the actual doing everything part, and that's what happened with the trilogy, so it's not a good comparison at all. I don't think, can any of you believe that George would do a monstrosity like that? It's not a good comparison. And
are we going to talk Star Wars? Because I'm really excited.
I'm just saying, there's been some things that have been revealed on the show that I think could have been not revealed. It really didn't tell me anything I didn't know, and it just kind of underwhelmed me.
Well, but we don't know if that's going to be the same in the books or not.
We don't.
We've already said that in the series there's not always stellar writing.
I'm just saying that's a reason why I'm okay with not seeing Howland Reed. Well, it
doesn't mean that just because he writes something that you hadn't imagined in your head, that what you hadn't imagined in your head disappears. You can decide, oh, well, no, I like more what I had imagined and forget the rest. That's what I did with the trilogy, with the prequels in the Star Wars. I'm like, well, they don't exist for me. I prefer what was in my head before. I just like some of it confirmed. And if it's confirmed, then I feel good. And if not, I erase it. So I like confirmation.
To me, R plus L equals J is confirmed, has been confirmed after Dance with Dragons. After that point, R plus L equals J was confirmed for me, and I didn't need anything more beyond that. Go for it, Scott.
No, I don't think we need the character to get the story. That's all.
Yeah.
I do want the story. I want to know. I don't think we need the character to get it.
As long as you get it.
The only thing where, it doesn't have to be Alan. I agree. It could be Mage Mormont, or I forgot what was it. But I would like Rob's will to play into something it could be something that, like gardening style that George dropped. But I would like Rob's will to play something in John's future. Like it'll like the same way he had to decide whether to help his brother with the war effort or to stay truthful to the watch. Like I would like the same kind of thing to maybe replay later with the will, but I don't
I
know.
do want the will to come out as well, and maybe it won't happen. But as you guys probably know, I hate Peter Baelish with the
Hater.
of 1,000 Suns. I really, really do.
Hater.
And I know that he wants to use Sansa to get the North. And I would love if that will came out at that moment and destroyed all his plans.
I feel like he just wants to use Sansa to get an orgasm. But
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question I want to ask everyone before, or unless you have something to say, Scott.
no, nope.
Okay. So does anyone not think that the Knight of the Laughing Tree is Lyanna Stark? I mean, we all know that Don Willie is the Knight of the Dabbing Tree, but the Knight of the Laughing Tree is a little bit more ambiguous. And well, actually, yeah, it's not even ambiguous. It's Lyanna Stark. Let's be honest. Anyone else think it's not?
I think it's ambiguous enough that it could not be. I think I said this during our analysis of this chapter on Dalva's Fingers. The text doesn't say for sure. The case of doubt on Lyanna's side is the booming voice.
I was going to ask, can we have Tinker and Anne each do booming voices to see how a female voice could get booming? Maybe convincing enough.
Well, for them to do it justice, they need a helm anyway. I mean, I don't know that the case against Lanna is that strong.
Can you give me a booming voice?
Go ahead,
just
Tinker.
so I have a reference.
Well, it says right here in the.
Give me a booming voice.
What does he say? I'll give you one. What does the Knight of the Laughing Tree say?
Teach your squire honor, that shall be ransom enough.
Sure, I'll give one. Teach your squire honor, and that shall be ransom enough.
Boom!
Okay, I'll try that, but I know somebody's gonna kill me with sleeping in the other room with no door. Teach your squire's honor. And what's the rest of that?
That shall be ransom enough.
And that shall be ransom enough. Does that work?
Look, the reality is
maybe that could have been
on stage. The reality is nobody's reaching the common folk in the palisade with their own voice without a mic system, and the story is embellished. So, who heard it? I don't know who actually heard what the knight said. It's in the story. They report a booming voice. It means something that they reported it. Maybe Howland added it to the story he told Meera and Jojen for a reason. We don't really know. I was just saying that is pretty much the only case against Lyanna.
Yeah, I agree.
There really isn't anything else in the story that says Lyanna couldn't be the Knight of the Laughing Tree.
Well, she did kick 3 squires on her own. Kicking 3 people's ass on their own, even if they're wimps, is not easy. Like 3-on-1 is not easy, even if you're super tough.
No. Who else could it be apart from Lyanna and Howland?
Well,
with the small
stature
there, and knowing that, who would you offer, Scott?
No, the only other person I would offer is Howland with the help of the gods, and it really just depends.
There's there's a little line right before the beginning of the story. In the year of the full spring, the Knight of the Laughing Tree, they called him. He might have been a crowned man, that one, or not. Jojen's face was dappled with green shadows. I'm like, okay, or not.
Or not applies to what? In this, sorry, read it again.
He might have been a crowned man, that one, or not. Jojen's face was, that's Jojen replying or not.
Well, according to Westeros, the wiki, let's see, Benjen Stark is a possible one. He would have been a trained fighter. Noble boys seem to start training in martial arts at an early age. He could he might be small enough to fit in the Krenimic's armor. But so here's Eddard could be another one.
So
yeah, but they're pretty. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say for Brandon and Ned, they're way too old. I mean, they're like, they're
I agree.
Tiny in stature. But to me, like, the
Ashara
reason
Dane is
why,
another one here,
yeah, the reason why it's
but same
Lyanna
thing. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that it's the only one that makes narrative sense. Why that story is important. The night disappears. Rhaegar goes looking for the night, doesn't find the night, then crowns Lyanna Queen of Love and Beauty out of the blue.
The blue, literal blue, with the
Exactly.
blue crown.
Yeah, I would agree with that, except that they shared the moment when he sang the song, and so it's not out of the blue. If he noticed her crying and they shared a moment, it isn't necessarily out of the blue. The story doesn't tell everything. Maybe they hooked up later that night and had a conversation. We don't know. I didn't mean hooked up like that, Tinker. Stop laughing.
Get your mind out of the gutter, Tinker.
It's just take on that it's how the story is told so elegantly, so stuff, and suddenly hooked up. It was very jarring to hear the contrast.
I just meant maybe they had other conversations. The story is fixated on the Laughing Tree specifically. Maybe Rhaegar saw Lyanna cry when he sang the song with his harp and went and talked to her later that night, and they had a soul-searching discussion between the two of them. We don't know. The story doesn't address that. Howland, the author of this story that told his children, wasn't there for that discussion. So
it was in Ned's stand.
Yeah, right. So we don't know. But so I would just say, I would caution against saying that the only thing that makes narrative sense between Rhaegar and Lyanna and something happening there is if she's the Night of the Laughing Tree. Well, they were both at the tourney. He saw her cry. They shared a moment at that point. They could have shared more. We don't know. That's not evidence towards that necessarily.
Yeah, she could have.
But I agree. Lyanna is the most obvious choice.
Yeah, he could have went to her and talked with her, had like you said, a soul-searching conversation, and she might have been like crying, been like, "I gotta marry the idiot who won the drunk contest." Oh.
Okay, it's just like when I say...
Remember who Robert was at that point, everyone. I'm a Baratheon defender here.
You're a Baratheon defender?
Robert Baratheon was a stripling warrior of all kinds. We don't need to go into it, Anne. I won't. But
no, I was talking to Tinker because you have probably not watched our Tower of Joy video, but she's very anti-Robert, and
I'm anti-Robert too. I'm anti-Robert, anti-Renly, and I love Stannis.
Well, I could probably record an hour-long thing on Robert, but Robert was a flawed, very flawed man. But at this point in his life,
big old fat flawed,
he was a man with a future. He was a man with a future, and one that should not have been trifled with or necessarily put down.
No, he was a tough guy, but that didn't actually make him a good person or a good husband material. I would not want.
It didn't make him a bad one yet either.
Hmm?
It didn't make him a bad one yet either. We don't need to go into it. We'll diverge a long time if we do.
Yes, we'll be here at all hours. There's a lot to talk about Robert Baratheon.
Yeah, exactly. We can do a special on that with you two. All I want to say, when I said it makes narrative sense, why in that story does it make sense to hide, to not have the reveal of the identity within the story if it's not because it's Lyanna?
Well, right, and also back to my previous question.
Howland, we should know at the end of the story that it's Howland. You see what I mean? Within
absolutely.
The concept of the context of the story.
It goes back to the question I asked earlier, which is why did they choose to tell that story? They probably know a million stories. They chose to tell that one for a reason. And the reason likely is, again, narratively, that it relates to Bran's family specifically and something important in Bran's family, which is what you're getting at, I think, Anne.
We can go back to that if you want to talk more about it, but two more things I wanted to talk about that are before we really do the factually trying to figure out what happened, comparing it to the World of Ice and Fire. So two things that are not touched on. First, Crannogman magic. And what happened in the Isle of Faces, that's pretty intriguing. So Crannogman magic, we always knew that they were all special, and it could definitely be embellished for the story, but it could breathe mud and run on leaves and change earth to water and water to earth with no more than a whispered word, which sounds a lot like what happened at the Arm of Dorne. It could talk to trees and weave words and make castles appear and disappear. I was especially confused by weave words because that's something that's used like either as a term for poetry or storytelling. Um, so what do
Well,
you
Meera seems to be pretty good at weaving words and telling stories here. She's almost like the storyteller of Conan here. She's just like tells a nice story and then leaves off. Well, that's for another time.
Yeah, I mean, weaving words. I mean, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just as in like an English speaker, I feel like it just means the ability to choose words and connect them well in a way that tells a story that people relate to. It doesn't necessarily mean magic. However, she mentions it as magic. So I don't know. It kind of throws the traditional definition on its ear a bit.
You know what it made me think of? It made me think of the children of the forest calling themselves the ones who sing the song of the earth. Like,
Right.
I don't know, like creating something out of words, out of song.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the way they mention magic makes you think of like an incantation or some kind. Weaving words that way.
And any thoughts
Yeah,
on
all
Green
this magic
Man?
is interesting. On the Green Men?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so it's weird, man. This series. So, like I said, I think I've read this series 3 times. I'm on my 4th/5th reread with the Davos Fingers cast. They mention in every single text total, in all the texts, there are 14 references to the words green men together. 14 total. 6 of them happen in this chapter. None of them tell you much about the green men at all. They reside on the Isle of Faces. They're there to protect this pact, as everyone knows. You don't really know anything about them. It's pretty amazing. And yeah, Anne, you mentioned earlier how Meera kind of shut down that portion of the conversation, saying that's a story for another time and not for me to tell.
Conan style.
It's probably the most interesting thing about the story. What do they teach him? What does he know? Do the Reeds, as I suspect in a crackpot theory I have secret relationships with the children of the forest and know more about all of those ancient kind of things than anyone else? And what really happened in those 3 months of winter when he was on that isle? Or maybe it was a long winter and it was longer than 3 months. I don't remember.
Yeah, it could have been 3. It could have been longer. No, because it's already spring when he leaves, right? Isn't that what they say?
Well,
they say he stays there for the winter and that he leaves in the spring. Sorry, Don.
Yeah, I was going to say, but remember, if this was the year of the fall spring, he left when he thought it was spring, and turned out not to be true. And he left probably because he heard about the tournament. It's like, oh, okay, well, you know what? The weather's broke. I pretty much learned everything that I can learn right now. So you know what? I'm gonna head off real quick and check out this tournament. I've been, studying for months or possibly even years. It's time for me to go out and see the world now and not just be this guy sitting on the Isle of Faces, because this is not where I belong to begin with. I'm glad.
I thought he was looking for the Isle of Faces.
I mean, but there's a difference between looking to gain knowledge and that being the place where you belong. That's not the place where he belonged. He was just going there just to gain more knowledge. And, once he learned everything that he could learn, he was like, all right, cool. Thank you for what you've taught me. Now it's time for me to go.
But I'm interested. Sometimes the most important part of a story is the part they don't tell. And I'm interested in what the Green Men taught him. What did he learn? What did he bring back to the Crannigs that he learned from the Green Men? The tourney is all well and good, but what does he know? And what did he learn? And what can he do? And it's all theory, right? It's fun for crackpots, but
no, it's definitely something that we all want to find out, because what he knows could possibly help Bran to save the world, or or to save the world from Bran if Bran happens to turn evil.
You know Bran's going to turn evil. He's going to be like, what's his name on Akira, the kid who just goes crazy.
Man,
powers.
Jerry, you probably didn't see, but the look on Anne's face when you said he's probably going to turn evil was just classic. Somebody needs to gift that.
No, but I agreed. I totally agreed. Like, yeah, he's gonna turn evil. And okay, just I don't want to. No, Tinker disagrees. But just I never really thought much of green men. Like to me, they were just like sort of children of the forest because we didn't know anything. Until I listened to mythical astrology of Ice and Fire. In his latest 2 episodes, he's talking about the green man. So I discovered that they're actually a symbol that we find like in a lot of tales in our world. So I won't bore you reading the Wikipedia page for that, especially because we're running late, but I will link his podcast. And I think he has a lot of link to on his website to the Green Man and the Corn Kings and all those things that have to do with this change of the season in our own mythology. So in case you did not know much about that, check it out.
I mean, every time I hear little green men running around, I can't help think about Charlie Kelly from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So is that pretty much it? I think we've pretty much covered a lot of the chapter. Unless anyone else has anything to say?
What else you got, Anne?
I mean, we need to wrap up. Everyone needs to go. I was just, wondering if we're gonna go about on the debate again about, did Ned hook up with Ashara Dane or not? Because we've had that.
No,
I think
Shaq brother.
He did, and I really think he did. I know Jerry disagree. I know Don really used to disagree, but maybe because of the videos he's watched lately, that he has changed his mind.
I mean, look, I'm always open to different possibilities, but I mean, I'm thinking real world here. In the real world, the shy guy just doesn't get the girl like that.
I mean, if you want my thoughts on this, it depends on the girl. You're true, but it's a low probability in my opinion, and it's not impossible, but it's a low probability. If you want a detailed reason on why I think it's an improbability, go watch the 5 Heartbeats.
Well, I want to know why it matters.
I don't even know why it matters. Why does it matter?
I know it matters for a lot of theories.
Well, unless she's an incubator that takes 15 months or whatever it is, it's not Ned's child that she has.
Can the relationship be important only if they, had a baby?
Oh, absolutely not. Sure. For character development, absolutely, it could be important. I don't mean to minimize that. I thought maybe we were implying that there were future ramifications of existing characters that maybe have been born.
No, okay, well, I mean, just I don't think at all. But if they had an affair, he was single, she was single. She was in Dragonstone when he was in the Vale.
It's not really an affair then.
It's not an affair at all.
It's a hookup.
Yeah, I'm all for it.
They hook up at the tourney, and then she follows Elia in Dragonstone. Is in the Vale. There's a while that happens before the war begins. They could continue having an affair.
Oh, sure, multiple times. There's no evidence that it happened, but it could have. Yeah, for sure.
I don't think so.
We don't have anything that tells us it did.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah. I think that if anything happened in Harrenhal, it happened between. It's more probable that it happened between Brandon and her than Ned.
It's weird because Ashara is such like a periphery major character in this series, but we don't really know anything about her.
No, we are.
Think about what you really know about Ashara.
We know that she was hot and that she had a good relationship with her brother. That's about it.
Yeah, you don't know much of anything. I mean,
And the Barristan
Who
was in
knows?
love with her.
But yeah, but all Barristan knew was her looks. He didn't know her, so we just know she's hot.
Well, we don't even know that that much either. He was I'm tired. My brain's not working. He was one of the knights, the King's Guard, and she was one of Elliot's
Elia's
friend. So
companions.
they
Yeah,
kind of spend quite a lot of time in each other's presence.
Definitely.
yeah, for sure.
I mean, although they spent a lot of time in Dragonstone even before the tourney, but yeah, I mean, it's still possible. They were all in King's Landing for a while, so okay.
Anything's possible.
Final thoughts, guys.
Like Kevin Durant says, anything is possible.
I think it's time for our final thoughts on that chapter.
Great. Who's going
Scott.
first?
Yeah, you're the guest.
Oh no! Final thoughts on the chapter. I like Bran. I believe Bran is a character of destiny. I believe that Bran, in his small interaction with who I believe was Morgan Little of the Little Clan, inspired a persistence of faith in the Starks, which all of the mountain clans have and continue to have, as evidenced by "We're doing this for a girl," quote, Ned's girl, which I think was Morgan Little in a few books ahead of now. I believe that Bran's powers scare Jojen, that Jojen feels inadequate as a teacher, that partially, I didn't say this before, but partially Bran's inability to do anything else and focus only on his abilities to Skinchanging and Warg make him a more powerful Stark than the others, but also that he is a character of destiny. And I believe that in the Night of the Laughing Tree story, we don't know conclusively who it was. Lanna is the most obvious choice, and that narratively, as Anne said, it makes the most sense. That's what I think of this chapter.
Okay, I'll go second. Very quickly, I think that again in this chapter, as in many Bran plays the role of vassal of the stories in the Song of Ice and Fire. In the next chapter, in the last chapter in the Storm of Swords, we have all the stories about the Night Forge. So he's in before we hear a lot of Oldland stories through his POV. So his POV is really the POV of stories, and I wonder if it could be somewhat linked to his destiny of being a green seer, where it will become one of those that sing the song of the earth.
It's the Song of Ice and Fire. Okay, so I'll say my last thing. I pretty much told my thoughts earlier about this chapter. Still agree. And hopefully we didn't get too off tangent here, but that can happen in Bran chapters because sometimes what they're doing isn't always the most interesting thing, but there's so many pieces of great nuggets in there. It's easy to dwell on those and get off tangent. So hopefully we stayed on track well enough here. And yeah, I mean the turning Harrenhal happened in the year of the false spring. So back when everyone was just dreaming of spring, and I think that's when we're going to get the reveal in a dream of spring.
Okay, I'll go next. Sorry, I'm gonna like fall asleep the moment that we stop because it's like 1 a.m. here in Europe. I really like this chapter. I've always been fascinated by what happened in Harrenhal because it's kind of like the moment that kind of started a lot of things, if not the whole major storyline. And I loved, I also love stories and like myths and legends and the way that it's spoken, with the symbology, sort of the names, and it's a lovely way that it's told, and how how they keep reminding him how important it is. It's just it really captured my mind, and Harrenhal is a story that I believe is going to be very important. And while it annoys me, I agree with Jerry, and I don't think we're going to get any answer until the spring book. Not the next one, the last one. I think it's going to wait until the last moment to give us all the information. Damn him. And,
well, there's going to be an 8th book, so it's going to be Dream of Spring Part 2.
Oh, shut up. And
Yeah.
I do believe that Bran has a big destiny, and there's been, a lot of you have mentioned that he's gonna, but I don't believe he's gonna go evil. I think this is in this, while he has a lot of power, while he does lose control, I think his inner core, when he's speaking with Little, when he says, you helped me, but when I get back, I'm gonna help you. And while I do believe that he's gonna be there, that he's gonna be very tempted, and he might actually do very negative things, very bad things, thinking, there's that saying, the pavement to hell was the way to hell was paved with good intentions, or something of that sort. That it's very tempting for the good to do very bad things, but I think that his inner core, that you help me, I'm gonna help you, I'm really, I think that in the end, either that will keep him in the good side or will redeem him in the end at some point.
Bran is going to become Tetsuo.
Okay, don't worry. Final
Oh,
thoughts.
shut up. Even Darth Vader came back to the light in the end.
All right. Yeah, like I said, this chapter was very informative. It gave us a lot of backstory. Well, not, it gave us backstory on characters that we've heard about, but also, okay. But also it gave us just a lot of the goings on around Bran and how he was able to remain safe so far. Hopefully we'll get more of House Little or Clan Little. I'm not exactly sure what you would call them. But again, this gave us a peek into some of the politics that were going on at the time during the Tony and Harrenhal, and also just shows the relationships not only between Ned and his children and how he treated information when it came to them, but also Howland Reed and his children and how he treated information when it came to them. So I just hope that we actually get a final resolution to all of this stuff, that doesn't leave us with more questions. But like I said, I love the chapter, and just can't wait to see what's in store later on.
You can call them Little House in the Mountain Prairie.
That's very good, Jerry. So thank you all very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget to check out Davos Fingers podcast if you haven't already. You are crazy. They're currently on a little break, but they'll soon be returning for their reread of Feast Dance. And if you have not, and they might have a special episode coming soon. And I know not me, but the other members of the Hype Watch are gonna do a big review on the latest Star Wars movie. So make sure to check that out too. And until next time, bye.
Bye bye.